The legend begins ocean whispers and forgotten myths. The sea was calm that night. Not quiet, never quiet, but calm, like a great creature breathing in its sleep. Each wave rolled in with a soft shimmer, folding itself gently onto the sand and retreating back again, leaving behind small glowing trails that faded like sighs. Above, the moon drifted slowly across the water's surface, turning every ripple into a path of silver light. A faint breeze carried the salt of the ocean, mixed with something older, something like memory. Near the edge of Bikini Bottom, just beyond where the coral cliffs met the open water, a tiny campfire flickered. Its flame wavered in the gentle current, glowing golden against the deep blues of the sea. Two shapes sat nearby, SpongeBob and Patrick, eyes half closed, the warmth of the fire reflecting in their pupils. Patrick yawned, rubbing his eyes with one star-shaped arm. "Hey, SpongeBob," he murmured, his voice low and heavy with sleep. "Why's the ocean humming?" SpongeBob tilted his head, listening. At first, all he heard was the hiss of waves, the soft whistle of current through coral, the distant song of a whale. But then, beneath it all, there was something else. A pulse, a deep, slow hum that seemed to come from below the ocean floor. It's like the sea is singing," SpongeBob whispered, his voice hushed as though afraid to disturb the melody. Patrick blinked slowly. "Maybe it's the clams snoring." SpongeBob chuckled softly, the sound rippling through the water like bubbles. "Maybe," he said. But his eyes didn't leave the sea. The glow of the waves brightened for a moment, pale blue lights swirling and curling toward the shore, forming faint shapes before fading. Patrick's eyelids drooped further. "It's kind of nice," he mumbled, "like a lullaby." He lay back on the sand, one arm under his head, the other holding a half-eaten marshmallow stick. SpongeBob sat upright, still watching the horizon. The wind carried faint whispers, or maybe just the rhythm of the tide. He thought he heard words, though they weren't words at all. Just soft tones rising and falling, like someone speaking from beneath a dream. He closed his eyes and listened. The hum grew clearer, deep, steady, like the heart of the ocean itself. Thum, thum, thum. Each beat matched the movement of the waves. Each sound filled the air, heavy and soft, echoing through the sand, through SpongeBob's chest. He imagined the ocean floor below them, endless valleys and caves, glowing roots of coral stretching like veins into the deep. Somewhere down there, something ancient was breathing. Not alive like them, not awake like the world above, but dreaming. The campfire flickered again. Its flames bent toward the sea, drawn by the quiet pulse beneath. SpongeBob reached out and steadied the pot resting on a rock beside it. Inside, sea kelp tea drifted in lazy circles. Patrick snored softly, bubbles escaping from his mouth, floating up toward the dark surface. The sound mixed with the ocean hum, rising bubbles, and low waves forming a rhythm that made SpongeBob's eyelids grow heavy too. He looked up at the moon. It hung low, enormous and glowing, painting the waves with silver light. For a moment, SpongeBob could swear he saw shapes moving in it, outlines of creatures long forgotten, half bear, half wave, swirling through the reflection. He blinked, and they were gone. Just the ocean again, just the hum. He whispered quietly, "Have you ever wondered how old the sea really is, Patrick?" Patrick stirred in his sleep, mumbling, "Older than my alarm clock." SpongeBob smiled, looking back to the horizon. "Yeah, way older." The hum deepened. Now the sand beneath them seemed to vibrate slightly, not enough to startle, just enough to feel alive. Tiny, glowing fish drifted past in the shallows, circling the firelight in spirals. They moved as one, their bodies pulsing with the same rhythm. SpongeBob watched them, mesmerized. Each flicker of their glow seemed to tell a story, flashes of images that weren't quite real. He thought he saw a shadow of a great bear-shaped figure swimming through the deep, its eyes glowing softly like molten pearls. But maybe it was only the fire reflecting on the water. Or maybe it was the sea remembering. The tide crept closer, washing over SpongeBob's feet with warm, glowing foam. He didn't move. He let it lap gently, like the ocean's heartbeat touching his own. Somewhere in the distance, a whale sang long and low, a sound that rolled through the water like thunder in slow motion. The hum answered. The two sounds intertwined, rising and falling in harmony. Patrick turned on his side, mumbling softly. "Bear's humming again." SpongeBob's gaze softened. "Yeah," he whispered. He never stopped. He reached for a small shell lying beside the fire and held it to his ear. The soft roar inside was endless, wave after wave after wave. But tonight, it wasn't just random noise. It was rhythm, pattern, voice. The ocean remembers everything, SpongeBob said to no one. Even the stories we forget. He leaned back, resting on his hands, eyes tracing the silver shimmer of the waves. Tiny jellyfish began to drift near the surface, their lights glowing faint pinks and purples, swaying gently like lanterns. They pulsed in slow motion, almost breathing with the tide. The fire burned lower. Its flame grew thin, its crackle faint, blending with the soft hiss of bubbles in the sand. Patrick's snores deepened, steady as the tide itself. The ocean's hum surrounded them, not loud, but vast, like a heartbeat carried through stone. SpongeBob whispered again, his voice blending with the water's sound. "Tell me your secret, old sea." The only reply was a long, slow rumble, so gentle it might have been a sigh. And then silence. The silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of the sound of distance, of depth, of time. It pressed softly around SpongeBob like the warm weight of a blanket. The stars above glowed faintly, their light bending through the surface. Every shimmer looked like a memory, flashes of light, where something once had been. A school of glowing plankton rose near the surface, twirling slowly like dust in a dream. Patrick's breathing matched the tide now, in, out, each wave a soft echo. SpongeBob lay down beside him, resting his head on a smooth stone. He watched the water, eyes heavy, mind adrift. The sea hummed again, but softer this time, like it was whispering directly into his thoughts. He didn't understand the words, but he felt them. Warmth, calm, belonging. As he drifted closer to sleep, the hum shifted once more. It no longer came from beneath the sea, it came from within it. From everywhere. From everything. The coral, the sand, the air between bubbles, all alive with that ancient pulse. Patrick's snore turned into a faint laugh, and even that sound was carried gently by the current. SpongeBob smiled, his eyes half closed now, watching the faint golden reflection of the moon on the water. The fire dimmed into embers. The tide rose one last time, touching the edge of the stone, whispering softly over it. The hum and the waves merged completely, one sound, one breath, one sea. And far below, in the darkness where no one had looked for centuries, something vast and peaceful stirred once more, not waking, just remembering. The legend had begun to hum again. The night thickened around them. The last glow of the campfire melted into the sand, and only the soft shimmer of plankton remained tiny sparks of blue and green swirling with the tide. SpongeBob lay still, eyes half open, watching them float above like tiny stars. He could no longer tell where the sea ended and the sky began. Everything, the water, the air, the sand, moved in one slow rhythm, like the entire world was breathing with him. From somewhere far away, a low sound rose again. It wasn't just the hum now, it had shape, tone, feeling. It rolled through the water like a great whisper, brushing against coral, echoing in the valleys of the ocean floor. Patrick stirred beside him, mumbling in his sleep. Don't feed it after midnight." Then he rolled over and started snoring again, bubbles drifting lazily from his mouth. SpongeBob smiled softly, though his gaze didn't move from the horizon. The glow of the sea had changed, no longer blue, but faintly gold, flickering as though lit from below. He felt the hum in his chest again, deeper now, like it was reaching out to him. His eyelids grew heavier, the line between waking and dreaming blurring like mist. Every wave that touched his hand felt warmer. Every sound, the soft crash of water, the whisper of current, began to slow down, blending into one long lullaby. He saw something in the distance, a shape just beneath the waves. At first, it was nothing more than shadow, but then it shifted. The shadow took form, broad shoulders, slow-moving fins, eyes glowing faint amber in the dark. A bear's silhouette, but made of water and light, drifting like smoke beneath the moonlit surface. SpongeBob blinked, unsure if he was dreaming. The figure moved gracefully, each motion slow as a tide. Where it swam, trails of golden bubbles followed, swirling like constellations underwater. He tried to sit up, but his body felt too calm, too heavy, as though the ocean itself had pressed a gentle hand on his chest. The sea bear, or what his mind thought must be, the sea bear turned its head slightly. Its eyes met SpongeBob's for a moment. They weren't threatening. They were kind, ancient, tired, and full of something deeper than words. SpongeBob's lips parted, but no sound came. He didn't need to speak. The hum between them carried everything. The sea bear began to fade, its shape dissolving into misty trails of light. The hum grew softer, changing pitch, becoming a melody slow and deep, like a heartbeat sung through water. SpongeBob felt it inside his bones. It wasn't scary, it was comforting, like remembering something you never knew you'd forgotten. He closed his eyes, and the dream took him fully. Now he was floating, not swimming, not walking, just suspended in the dark water. The world around him shimmered faintly gold, currents moving like silk ribbons, shapes of coral stretched toward him, waving gently like welcoming hands. He drifted past glowing seaweed that swayed in time with the hum. Every leaf, every bubble, every speck of sand seemed to breathe together. From far below came another rumble, slower, heavier. It wasn't a volcano, not this time. It was something older, something alive within the sea itself. And beneath that, whispers. Real voices, now faint, layered, carrying like wind through hollow shells. He could almost make out words. The tide, remember. The bear still sleeps. Do not wake the deep. The whispers blended with the hum, rising and falling in the same soft rhythm. They weren't warnings. They were lullabies. SpongeBob drifted closer to the source of the sound, a canyon of coral glowing with faint red veins. Tiny shrimp floated through the gaps, their bodies flashing briefly like sparks of fire. The entire reef pulsed slowly alive, listening, breathing. He reached out his hand and touched the coral wall. Warmth flowed through his fingertips. A light ripple spread across the reef like a heartbeat, running down into the darkness below. And there, for just a moment, he saw the sea bear again. Only its reflection this time, rippling faintly in the coral's glow. Patrick's voice echoed distantly through the dream. "SpongeBob, don't touch the lava cheese." The sound made SpongeBob laugh quietly. Even in dreams, Patrick was Patrick. But the moment passed. The hum returned, louder now, wrapping around him like a blanket. The canyon below lit up, revealing patterns on the rocks, carvings shaped like paws, waves, and moons. Each symbol pulsed faintly with gold light. He floated down slowly, drawn by the glow. Every few seconds, a bubble rose from the cracks, carrying a faint echo of sound, not random, but rhythmic. It was as if the sea itself was speaking in bubbles. He moved deeper, and the world turned quieter. The light dimmed. The hum softened until it was nothing more than vibration against his heart. Then silence. Only his breathing remained. In that silence, he heard something new, a low, soft breath. Not his own. It came from beneath the ocean floor, deep, long, peaceful. He looked down. The sand was moving, rising slightly, falling again. Like the world itself was breathing in sleep. SpongeBob whispered, "Are you dreaming too?" The sand shimmered faintly gold as if in reply. Then slowly, an image began to form beneath it, a huge outline glowing faintly beneath the ocean bed. A paw. Then another. Then the faint curve of a head. The sea bear was sleeping right below Bikini Bottom, under the reefs, under the sand, under the laughter and noise of everyday life. It had always been there, humming in its dreams, keeping the sea calm and alive. SpongeBob felt no fear, only awe. He drifted closer to the glowing shape until the light filled his vision. The hum became so deep it turned into silence again, a stillness, so complete it made him feel like part of the sea. Patrick appeared beside him. Now not the real Patrick, but a dream version, drifting with a big sleepy grin on his face. He was holding a jellyfish net, but instead of jellyfish, glowing stars floated inside it. They shimmered softly as he turned. "Hey, SpongeBob," Dream Patrick mumbled. "The stars are swimming again." SpongeBob smiled, his voice soft as the current. "Let them. They belong here." The stars drifted from Patrick's net and floated upward, merging with the glow above. Each one became a bubble, then a ripple, then light. The hum faded one last time. Now there was only warmth, quiet, and the feeling of being safe. The sea bear's breath slowed again. The coral around them dimmed to a gentle golden hue. The water moved softly, wrapping SpongeBob and Patrick like a calm tide. Far above, the moon shone down through the surface, no longer distant, but close, like an old friend watching over them. The whispers returned, almost inaudible. "Sleep, little waves. The tide is kind tonight." SpongeBob's body grew lighter. He could feel himself floating back upward toward the surface, toward the soft shore where the fire had been. When he opened his eyes again, he was lying next to Patrick once more, the faintest dawn light glimmering through the water. The fire had gone out. The hum was gone. Only the slow rhythm of waves remained. He turned his head toward his friend. Patrick was still asleep, smiling faintly, holding the same seashell as before. SpongeBob smiled too, whispering, "Good night, sea bear." The morning never truly came to the ocean floor, only softer shades of blue, deep and endless, like dawn that refused to wake. SpongeBob floated halfway between sleep and waking, his mind drifting where dreams and memory met. The sea hummed faintly still. Not the heavy hum of before this one was light, like someone quietly humming a tune to themselves far away. It wound gently through the coral reefs and shell tunnels, brushing past the sand and curling into the space where SpongeBob rested. He opened his eyes slowly. Everything was different now, softer, hazier, as though the sea had turned into a watercolor painting. Patrick still lay beside him, bubbles escaping rhythmically with each snore. But the world around them had changed. Coral branches glowed with pastel light, and tiny fish swam in graceful loops that looked like writing. SpongeBob blinked, watching them trace faint golden letters in the water. They disappeared as quickly as they formed, but he felt like he knew what they said. It wasn't words exactly, it was emotion, carried in color and motion. Peace, memory, rest. He sat up slowly, and the sand beneath him shimmering softly like liquid glass. Every grain seemed alive, small sparks of bioluminescent dust shifting with the current. Then he noticed the sound again, faint but growing clearer. It wasn't just humming anymore. It was a voice, or many voices, layered, like the sea itself was singing. He turned his head toward the open water. There, floating at the edge of vision, was something new, a ring of light. It expanded slowly, rippling outward through the sea like the echo of a bell. As it passed over the coral, the reefs began to glow brighter, their shapes shifting slightly, forming curved patterns like the mark of a giant paw. The voice grew clearer, still calm, still soft. Long ago, before the tides were named. SpongeBob froze. He didn't know if the voice was in his head or all around him. It spoke slowly, like each word took a whole breath to form. The sea was restless. The waves rose without rhythm. The deep had no sleep. The water stirred. Beneath SpongeBob's feet, the sand shimmered and lifted, shaping itself into images made of light and shadow. He saw an ocean in chaos, currents twisting wildly, whirlpools clashing, waves crashing with no pattern. And then, through the chaos, a massive shape emerged, the sea bear, glowing gold and silver, its eyes calm but its presence vast. It walked through the water as if the sea bent to its will. Where it passed, the waves stilled. The reef settled. The water itself sighed. SpongeBob whispered, "You made the sea sleep." The vision responded with a low pulse, vibrating softly through the water. I sang the ocean to stillness. The image shifted now, showing the sea bear curling up at the bottom of the world, wrapping the deep in its arms. The water turned dark again, calm, silent. The hum returned, slow, steady, eternal. Patrick rolled over, muttering in his sleep, 5 more minutes, bear." SpongeBob smiled faintly, eyes glimmering in the soft gold light. He floated closer to the glowing sand, the images fading into ripples. Now the coral around him was moving too, opening like flowers. From their centers, small orbs of light rose, drifting toward the surface. Each orb pulsed faintly. When they touched the light from above, they shimmered, revealing small memories inside flashes of scenes long past. Ancient creatures swimming beside the sea bear. Whales that sang in harmony with its hum. The very first corals blooming in rhythm with its breath. The orbs floated upward and vanished one by one. SpongeBob reached out to touch one. It felt warm, soft as a bubble. When it popped, a faint sound came from within, a single tone, pure and gentle, like a lullaby. He whispered to himself, "It's still singing." The sea seemed to hear him. A soft current moved past, carrying more light, more voices. The tone deepened, blending with the hum once more. "Every tide remembers my song," the whisper said. "Every creature carries it when they sleep." SpongeBob's heart filled with warmth, not excitement, not fear, just that slow, spreading calm that made everything else He closed his eyes and floated again, letting the current carry him. He passed through tunnels of coral that glowed in spirals. Every turn led to new light, greens, blues, golds, all fading into one another like breath. Sometimes he thought he saw faces gentle, smiling, drifting among the coral branches. Ancient guardians maybe watching the ocean's dream unfold. He whispered, "You kept the sea safe all this time." The water around him brightened slightly, as though the ocean was nodding. He drifted past a school of glowing manta rays. Their wings moved so slowly it was like they were gliding through honey. Each flap sent ripples through the water, tiny waves that hummed in the same rhythm as the sea bear's song. Above him, Patrick began to float too, still asleep, still smiling. His snoring matched the pulse perfectly, an accidental harmony that made SpongeBob giggle softly. The bubbles from Patrick's mouth floated upward, joining the glowing orbs, and for a brief moment, the entire sea shimmered with laughter. Then the hum softened again. The water dimmed to deep blue, like the color of the hour before dawn. A current brushed against SpongeBob's face, warm, steady, or almost like a hand. He felt the sea bear's presence again, not seen, but felt. The same feeling he had when he looked at the stars as a child, small, but safe under something greater. The voice returned, quieter now, like the last verse of a song fading away. "When you hear the tide hum, remember, the sea still dreams." SpongeBob opened his eyes, and for just a moment, he saw the faintest outline of the sea bear above him, woven into the shimmer of the waves. Then, like mist, it vanished. Silence returned, the true, soft silence of the deep sea. Only the faint click of coral shells and Patrick's snores remained. SpongeBob lay back again, sinking slightly into the sand. He could still feel the rhythm beneath him, slow, endless kind. He smiled, whispering, "Good night, Big Bear." A final bubble rose from the sand where the vision had been, shimmering faint gold before bursting. The sound it made was a soft sigh, like a door gently closing. And then everything settled. The tide returned to its steady rhythm. The coral dimmed to soft blue. The current cooled. The dream folded back into sleep. SpongeBob closed his eyes again, his breathing in time with the waves, his mind echoing with that one steady hum. Above them, through miles of quiet water, the surface rippled faintly with light, the moon shining like a memory, the ocean sighing like a song, and deep below the sea bear resting once more beneath the tide. Time no longer passed the way it did on land. Down here, under miles of still water, minutes stretched into hours, and hours dissolved into the rhythm of the tide. SpongeBob drifted in that in-between, neither asleep nor awake, carried by the soft current that moved through the reef like breath. The hum of the ocean had quieted to a single note, now low, deep, endless. It wasn't something he heard with his ears anymore. It was inside him, pulsing gently in his chest, matching the slow beat of his heart. Tiny sand particles swirled in faint spirals above him. Each one caught a glimmer of distant light, maybe from the moon, maybe from something older. They rose and fell like stardust caught in water, drifting in graceful arcs. Patrick turned over in his sleep, mumbling something about pancakes. The sound made SpongeBob giggle softly, the laughter bubbling out like air from a seashell. For a moment, the deep sea felt alive again, playful, like it had always been waiting for them to wake. The coral swayed lazily in the current, soft tendrils brushing against SpongeBob's arm as if to comfort him. Somewhere nearby, a tiny jellyfish glowed faint pink, hovering close before floating off again, leaving a faint trail of light that faded into the blue. SpongeBob sat up slowly, his body moving weightlessly. He didn't feel tired anymore. Instead, there was a warmth spreading through him, not from the sun, but from the quiet itself. It was the kind of warmth you feel when you realize the world is kind, even when it's silent. He looked around. Everything that had glowed before was dim now, almost invisible. The visions, the sea bear, the golden sand, all gone. But the feeling remained. He pressed his hands into the sand gently. The ground pulsed once, faintly, like a heartbeat. He whispered, "Thank you." The sea responded not in words this time, but in touch. A single ripple passed through the water, brushing against his face, cool and kind. It was the sea's way of smiling back. Patrick stirred again, slowly blinking his eyes open. He yawned, bubbles spilling upward. "Morning already," he murmured. SpongeBob smiled. "Kinda. I think we slept through the whole night tide." Patrick rubbed his eyes and squinted. The world around them shimmered in pale blue light. Somewhere far above, faint rays filtered down from the surface, the first whispers of morning sunlight reaching the deep. He blinked, and then frowned sleepily. "Did we dream something?" SpongeBob hesitated. He looked up, watching the golden trails where the orbs had vanished. "I think the sea dreamed," he said softly, "and we were just part of it." Patrick stared for a long moment, his face still half lost in drowsiness. Then he smiled in that slow, easy way of his. "That's nice," he said. "I like when the sea dreams." He rolled back onto his side and added, "It snores louder than I do." SpongeBob laughed again, the sound small but bright. He looked upward one more time. The last traces of moonlight shimmered faintly on the sand, fading as the sunlight took over. The reef around them woke gradually, coral opening like petals, fish weaving through in slow, lazy schools. Each color came alive again, not glowing now, but real. Soft pinks, deep greens, the golden beige of the sand returning to its familiar calm. SpongeBob stretched, bubbles escaping from his arms as he moved. He felt lighter, as if something heavy had been lifted from his thoughts. It wasn't that he'd learned something specific, it was just that everything felt right. Like the sea had sung a secret to him that words could never describe. He whispered quietly, "You're still out there, aren't you?" The water around him rippled slightly, not enough to be a wave, not enough to be wind. Just a subtle motion, as though the sea had heard him. Patrick rolled over again, facing SpongeBob, his eyes half open. "Hey, SpongeBob." "Yeah?" "Next time we hear that hum thing again," he mumbled, "let's hum back." SpongeBob grinned. "Deal." They both lay back, staring upward at the pale light filtering from above. The ocean's surface shimmered faintly like a moving mirror. In that reflection, SpongeBob thought he saw something not quite a shape, but a feeling. A vast, gentle presence, curling like mist, fading slowly into brightness. He didn't try to hold on to it. Dreams weren't meant to stay. They were meant to be remembered softly, like ripples fading after a stone touches water. So he just breathed, in time with the tide, in time with the hum. Hours passed, though it didn't feel that way. Fish came and went, coral shadows shifted, and the soft glow of the deep turned warmer, more golden. Above them, the surface rippled faintly waves glinting with morning light. Eventually, SpongeBob and Patrick rose to their feet, brushing sand off their sides. They walked together, slow and quiet, through the coral valley. Everything looked a little different now, not because it had changed, but because they had. Every sound seemed softer, every current gentler. Even the silence felt full of meaning. Patrick nudged SpongeBob. "Do you think the sea bear watches us?" SpongeBob nodded. "Always, but not like watching. Patrick frowned. "Like resting and watching?" "Yeah," SpongeBob said, smiling. "Like the sea itself keeping an eye on its dreams." Patrick seemed satisfied with that. They kept walking, passing through tunnels of coral that curved upward toward light. SpongeBob looked back once. In the distance, faint and almost invisible, a paw-shaped mark was etched into the sand where they'd slept. It shimmered for a moment, then faded away. He didn't say anything. Some memories were better left untouched, quiet, sacred things that belonged to the sea. As they reached the surface, the light grew brighter. They could see the outlines of the crusty crab in the distance, golden in the morning sun, surrounded by tiny fish darting like birds. The world was awake again. SpongeBob took one deep breath, the kind that fills you all the way through. He could still faintly hear the hum beneath everything, beneath the waves, beneath the clatter of distant jellyfish, beneath even his own heartbeat. He smiled softly. "Good morning, sea bear." A single bubble floated upward, catching the light. Inside it, for the briefest second, was the shimmer of golden fur and a calm, endless eye. Then it popped soundless, leaving only sunlight and sea. Patrick turned to SpongeBob. "Ready for breakfast?" SpongeBob laughed. "Always," stirring up flecks of golden sand that danced in ribbons through the light. Above, the sun filtered through the water in soft streams, painting everything in pale amber and blue. SpongeBob floated near the sea floor, still feeling the weightless calm that had lingered since the night before. Patrick swam lazily beside him, yawning into a trail of bubbles. "Feels quiet today," Patrick mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "It's the nice kind of quiet," SpongeBob replied. "Like the ocean's thinking." They drifted past the jellyfish fields, which shimmered faintly in the early light. The jellyfish moved slower than usual, pulsing like they too were waking from a dream. Each one left behind a faint trail of luminescence that curved and disappeared like handwriting fading from a page. The sand below them was smooth and untouched. Except it wasn't. SpongeBob paused. There, just beyond a patch of seagrass, he saw something faint but deliberate. Lines carved into the sand, curving and crossing in repeating patterns. At first, it looked like nothing, just the work of currents or a drifting shell. But as the light shifted, the markings glowed faintly gold. Patrick squinted. "Is that doodles?" SpongeBob knelt down, brushing away the loose sand with gentle sweeps of his hand. The carvings deepened, forming clearer shapes, symbols, curves and dots, spirals and paw-like prints, all arranged in careful lines along a long, flat stone half buried beneath the sand. It was old, older than anything SpongeBob had ever seen near Bikini Bottom. The edges of the stone were softened by time, coral slowly growing across parts of it. When his hand brushed over one of the carvings, the water around it shimmered faintly, releasing a sound like a heartbeat underwater. Patrick jumped back. "It talked." SpongeBob smiled. "Not talked, hummed." like the sea bear's song. He pressed his hand against another carving, a spiral surrounded by small, claw-like shapes. The same sound returned low, deep, steady. But now it wasn't alone. The currents around them shifted, aligning to the rhythm. Bubbles rose in perfect timing, as though the sea itself was breathing in harmony with the sound. Patrick tilted his head. "I think it likes us." SpongeBob chuckled softly, but his eyes were focused. The light reflecting off the stone seemed to pulse in time with the sound brighter, then dimmer, like the beat of a sleeping heart. He looked closer, tracing one symbol, in particular the outline of a large, rounded figure standing upright, its arms wide, its body textured with short, sharp lines that looked almost like fur. A bear. SpongeBob whispered the word under his breath. The water around the carving shimmered again, and this time the hum deepened, spreading outward. Every nearby shell vibrated softly, choral tendrils swaying to the same rhythm. Patrick's eyes widened. "The sea bear?" The word echoed faintly through the reef, bouncing off rocks, fading slowly into the hum of the current. SpongeBob nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think we found his story." They both stood still for a while, letting the moment stretch. It felt sacred, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the quiet, breathing way the ocean sometimes had. The hum began to fade, replaced by the soft sounds of the sea-distant bubbles, the slow creak of coral shifting, the whisper of sand. SpongeBob sat down beside the stone, running his hand along the carvings as though trying to read them like words. He couldn't, of course, but he could feel what they meant. The shapes spoke not in sentences, but in sensations, warmth, protection, peace. It was as if the sea itself had written this, not for eyes, but for hearts. Patrick plopped down beside him, staring at the carvings. "So, what do you think it says?" SpongeBob smiled faintly. "Maybe it's not saying anything. Maybe it's remembering." Patrick blinked. "The rock, remember?" SpongeBob nodded. "Everything does. Waves remember the moon. Coral remembers the sun. Even sand remembers where it's been." Patrick thought about that for a long moment, then whispered, "That's a lot to remember." SpongeBob laughed softly. "Yeah, but maybe that's why it hums, so it doesn't forget." They sat there in silence again, listening to the faint sound that still lingered in the water. Every now and then, a jellyfish drifted past, its glow illuminating a new section of the carvings, more symbols, more spirals, more paw marks, curling around each other like waves. One section caught SpongeBob's attention, a larger spiral with rays extending outward. In the center, a smaller bear shape stood surrounded by tiny circles. He leaned closer, tracing it slowly with his fingertip. As he touched it, a faint image shimmered above the stone, not solid, but like a reflection made of light. It showed the sea bear walking along a shore of golden sand, each step leaving behind glowing footprints that faded into the tide. The image flickered softly, then vanished, leaving only the carvings again. Patrick gasped. "Did you see that?" SpongeBob nodded slowly. "I think it's showing us the legend." They waited for more, but the stone went still again. Only the soft hum remained deep, rhythmic, like breathing. Patrick frowned, scratching his head. "So the sea bear walked on sand? Like here?" SpongeBob nodded. "Maybe long ago. Maybe before there even was a Bikini Bottom." The thought made Patrick's eyes widen. "So like prehistoric pancakes?" SpongeBob chuckled. "Something like that." The currents shifted again, brushing gently against the carvings. Fine grains of sand lifted off, revealing more details, flowing lines like waves, small dots like stars, and along the edge, faint scratches forming words in an ancient pattern. SpongeBob couldn't read them, but as he looked, the water shimmered, and a soft voice, not quite sound, not quite song, filled the space around them. It was the same tone they'd heard in the dream. Low, kind, eternal. It said nothing they could understand, yet they understood everything. The sea bear was not a monster, not a myth meant to frighten. It was a guardian. A being that once walked when the sea was young, when even the moon was a stranger to the tides. The hum faded again. SpongeBob sat very still, eyes half closed, breathing with the rhythm of the waves. Patrick whispered, "It feels sleepy." SpongeBob nodded. Maybe it's dreaming again. The hum of the carvings lingered in the water long after the symbols had faded. It was not loud, not sharp. It was something you felt more than heard, a vibration that sank gently into the sand, into the shells, into the hearts of anyone nearby. SpongeBob could feel it in his hands, in his chest, even in the rhythm of his breathing. Patrick tilted his head. "It's like the ocean's purring." SpongeBob smiled. "Maybe it's leading us somewhere." He looked past the coral ridge where the stone lay and noticed that the sand beyond it had a strange pattern, faint lines weaving and twisting in the same spiral shapes as the carvings. They stretched out into the deeper water, glowing faintly like a golden trail beneath the rippling light. "Footsteps," SpongeBob whispered. Patrick squinted. "Whose footsteps?" SpongeBob hesitated. The answer was already there, quiet but certain. The sea bears. They followed. The sand beneath them shimmered as they swam slowly, each stroke gentle enough not to disturb the path. The light grew softer the farther they went, the surface above fading into a pale blue mist. Coral walls rose on either side, forming a canyon of colors, soft violets, deep greens, and faint glows of blue. Tiny shrimp flickered like stars between the cracks. Every now and then SpongeBob brushed his hand over the walls, feeling the same carved shapes. They continued in sequence paws, spirals, lines that curved into the outline of a face. Each one gave off a small hum when touched, like the ocean remembering a note of a song. Patrick drifted lazily beside him, looking around with wide eyes. "Feels like we're inside a story," he murmured. SpongeBob nodded. "Maybe we are." The canyon curved gently, opening into a wide basin filled with golden sand. At its center stood a structure half buried by coral and time, an archway made of smooth stone, its top broken, its base covered in sea plants swaying like curtains. The same symbols adorned its sides, but these were brighter, more alive. Each mark pulsed with soft golden light, fading in and out like a heartbeat. The hum that surrounded them grew deeper here, layered with faint tones like flutes and distant bells. Patrick pressed his ear against the stone. "It's singing." SpongeBob smiled softly. "It's remembering." He swam closer, tracing the archway's curve with one hand. The moment he did, the sand beneath them stirred, forming ripples that moved outward in perfect circles. A current passed through the basin, not cold but warm, gentle, wrapping around them like a slow breath. The carvings lit up brighter. The water shimmered, and for a moment, it felt like the sea was no longer just water. It was something else, something dreaming. Patrick blinked. "SpongeBob, are we underwater or inside the dream?" SpongeBob paused. "Maybe both." The current carried them forward through the archway. Beyond it, the basin deepened, and the sand turned from gold to glowing white. It felt soft beneath their feet, almost like cloud. The path ahead was lined with small rocks, carved with symbols of waves and paws. As they walked, or rather, floated, each step released a small sound, a note that joined the soft melody flowing through the canyon. It was as if they were walking across an instrument that had been waiting for someone to play it again. Patrick stepped on one stone, and it let out a high-pitched tone. He giggled. "I made music!" SpongeBob laughed, stepping beside him. His stone made a lower note. Together they moved slowly, one sound at a time, creating a rhythm that echoed around the basin, simple, clumsy, and yet perfectly in tune with the hum of the sea. The deeper they went, the softer the light became, until the only glow came from the symbols themselves and the faint halo of the seafloor. In the distance, they began to see shapes, massive choral formations molded into rough, organic figures. At first, they looked like ordinary rocks, but as SpongeBob swam closer, he saw faces, carved faces, dozens of them calm, peaceful, eyes closed. Each one had soft, round features and faint outlines of fur, like gentle echoes of the sea bear's form. Patrick whispered, "Whoa, it's a family." SpongeBob floated closer, brushing away the sand from one of the faces. The carving glowed faintly beneath his touch, revealing lines that looked like waves running through its fur. He smiled softly. Maybe the sea bear wasn't alone. Patrick tilted his head. "You mean there were sea bears? Like, a bunch of them?" "Maybe," SpongeBob said. "Or maybe it's just one remembering all the times it's been reborn." Patrick blinked slowly. "That's deep." SpongeBob laughed quietly. "Yeah, the ocean does that." They floated in silence for a while, surrounded by the faces, the hum, and the glow. The water felt heavy with calm, like everything was holding its breath. The current slowed to a still rhythm, one that pulsed through the canyon like the beat of a sleeping heart. Then the hum shifted. Deeper now, slower. The sand stirred, rising in tiny spirals around them. Patrick's eyes went wide. "SpongeBob, I think something's happening." SpongeBob nodded, his expression steady but curious. The air, or rather, the water felt charged, like static before a gentle storm. The glow from the carvings merged together, flowing toward the basin's center. A circle of light formed on the sand. Inside it, shapes began to rise, not solid but translucent, made entirely of shimmering dust and light. At first it looked like smoke. Then slowly the form became clear, massive paws, round ears, the shape of a muzzle outlined in gold. Patrick whispered, "Is that him?" SpongeBob didn't move. The figure hovered there, barely visible, as if it were made of memory. The sea bear, or its echo, stood silent, eyes closed, its body flowing like water. Its presence wasn't heavy or frightening. It felt warm, ancient, patient kind. It breathed once, and the water rippled outward in a slow wave that brushed against SpongeBob and Patrick like a soft wind. They both closed their eyes. And in that silence, the hum transformed into something new, a deep melodic tone that felt like a lullaby made from the sea itself. Images shimmered faintly around the figure. Waves rising under starlight, paw prints glowing on golden sand, the moon casting silver lines over calm waters. Patrick whispered, "It's beautiful." SpongeBob nodded, voice soft. "It's showing us what it remembers." The figure's eyes opened two glowing circles of warm amber. For a second, the entire basin brightened, every coral and shell reflecting its light. Then slowly the sea bear's image began to fade, dissolving back into golden dust that drifted upward through the canyon. Patrick reached out, catching one of the glowing particles in his palm. It vanished instantly, leaving behind only a faint warmth. SpongeBob smiled. See? It's not gone. It's part of the sea now. Patrick exhaled softly. So, it's still sleeping? Always, SpongeBob said. The sea never stops dreaming. The canyon grew quiet again, the hum returning to its soft rhythm. The carvings dimmed, the sand settled, and the current resumed its gentle sway. SpongeBob looked back at the archway. It no longer glowed, but somehow it felt alive, as if watching over them, listening. He placed his hand against it and whispered, "Thank you." For a long while after the sea bear's light faded, SpongeBob and Patrick didn't move. They simply floated there in the soft blue haze, letting the water rock them gently like leaves drifting in the wind. The last traces of gold shimmered between the coral spires, flickering softly before disappearing into the sand. The silence wasn't empty, it was full. Full of tiny sounds, bubbles sighing, coral creaking, distant currents brushing through seagrass like soft fingers. Even the sea's hum had changed. It was lower now, slower, almost like a heartbeat in deep sleep. Patrick finally exhaled a long, lazy stream of bubbles. That was, wow. SpongeBob smiled faintly. Yeah, I think we just saw a dream that's been waiting to be seen. Patrick turned onto his back, staring upward. The light filtering from above wobbled gently, scattered by the slow-moving waves at the surface. The colors of the canyon reflected onto his face, turquoise, gold, and violet like sunlight caught in crystal glass. I feel kind of floaty, Patrick mumbled, eyes half closed. Not just in the water, in my head too. SpongeBob laughed softly. That's okay. The sea does that when you listen long enough. They drifted side by side, neither speaking for a while. The seafloor below them shimmered faintly, the spiral pattern still glowing where the sea bear's light had touched. Each spiral pulsed at its own rhythm, slow, uneven, like soft breaths overlapping. SpongeBob reached down and let his hand hover just above one of the spirals. Tiny bubbles lifted from the sand and swirled around his fingers, then rose toward the surface in twirling streams. Patrick lazily reached toward another one. Hey, mine's dancing. It's reacting to you, SpongeBob said. It's remembering the touch. Patrick blinked, his face a mix of confusion and wonder. It remembers me? SpongeBob nodded. Everything here remembers. The sea bear, the stones, even the bubbles. Patrick smiled sleepily. And then I hope they remember me taking a nap later. SpongeBob laughed, his voice muffled by the water. They probably will. The canyon's hum shifted again, this time lighter, almost playful, as if the sea had smiled with them. A faint current drifted through, carrying glowing specks of plankton. They swirled around SpongeBob and Patrick like tiny fireflies, outlining their shapes in shimmering blue light. Each movement of their hands sent new ripples through the glowing dust, creating waves of slow color that spread across the canyon floor. It looked like the ocean was painting, and they were the brushstrokes. Patrick floated on his back, watching the colors mix. It's so pretty. It's like the sea's coloring outside the lines. SpongeBob nodded. Maybe that's what dreams look like underwater. They both giggled quietly. The sound rippled through the water, soft but warm, blending with the ambient tones of the sea. Above them, jellyfish began to drift into the canyon, slow, glowing, silent. Their tendrils shimmered like ribbons of moonlight, and each pulse of their bodies matched the hum of the canyon. One by one, they formed a circle above SpongeBob and Patrick, surrounding the basin in a soft halo of light. Patrick gasped, "Are they having a meeting?" SpongeBob looked up at the glowing ring of jellyfish. Maybe they're remembering, too. The jellyfish moved in perfect harmony, their glowing bodies pulsating to the rhythm of the sea's lullaby. Every few seconds, a new tone joined the hum, faint chimes, deep echoes, gentle whooshes that blended into something that almost sounded like a song. SpongeBob closed his eyes. The sound wrapped around him like a blanket. Each note felt like a heartbeat, like the slow pulse of something older than time. The hum, the glow, the stillness, all of it felt alive, not in a loud way, but in a deeply quiet, breathing way. Patrick whispered, "Do you think the sea bear can hear this?" SpongeBob opened his eyes slowly. "I think this is the sea bear, or at least what's left of its dream." They watched as the jellyfish circled lower, their tendrils brushing the sand in delicate arcs. Wherever they touched, the sand brightened, revealing faint new symbols underneath, freshly uncovered by the current. These ones were smaller than the earlier carvings, more intricate waves folding over waves, spirals within spirals. In the center of the basin, one symbol stood out, a paw surrounded by rings that looked like ripples spreading across a pond. Patrick pointed. "That one's glowing the most." SpongeBob nodded. "Maybe it's the first footprint, the one that started the legend." Patrick blinked slowly. "So, like, the sea bear's first step?" "Yeah," SpongeBob said softly. "The first time it touched the world." For a while, they just floated there, watching the symbol glow and fade with each pulse of the hum. It didn't change shape or grow brighter, it simply existed, steady and calm, like it had all the time in the world. The jellyfish drifted upward again, rising through the canyon and vanishing into the distance. The last few bubbles they left behind sparkled faintly and then popped in silence. SpongeBob sighed, still gazing at the glowing paw print. "You know, Patrick, it's funny. Everyone used to think the sea bear was scary." Patrick's eyes widened a little. "Yeah, remember when everyone used to draw circles for protection?" SpongeBob chuckled. "Yeah, but now that I've seen it like this, I think it was just trying to keep the sea safe. Maybe the circles were never for keeping it away. Maybe they were for keeping it company." Patrick blinked. "So we were actually helping it sleep?" SpongeBob smiled. "Maybe we always were." And the thought lingered, soft and comforting. They both watched as the glowing symbol dimmed slowly, its light merging back into the sand. The hum followed, fading into a whisper so low it was almost silence. Patrick's eyelids drooped. "SpongeBob," he mumbled, "if the sea bear's dreaming, do you think it dreams about us too?" SpongeBob looked at him, then at the quiet canyon around them. The soft ripples in the sand, the gentle glow, the fading hum, it all felt like an answer. "I think so," he whispered. "I think we're part of the dream now." Patrick's response was a slow, sleepy snore that sent a few bubbles floating lazily upward. SpongeBob smiled and stayed where he was, watching the last traces of golden light fade into blue. Everything was still. Everything was slow, every sound, every motion, like the sea itself was nodding off beside them. The canyon darkened slightly as the glow retreated into the depths. Only the faint reflections of their bodies remained, two friends floating quietly in the memory of an ancient guardian. The hum turned into nothing more than a soft vibration under their skin, not loud enough to hear, but steady enough to feel. SpongeBob's eyes drifted halfway shut. He thought about the paw print. He thought about how sand could hold a memory for so long. He thought about how even the sea, with all its vastness, could find time to dream. A small current brushed past, warm and gentle, carrying the faint scent of coral and salt. It curled around SpongeBob's arms and drifted toward Patrick, swaying his sleeping form slightly. The current felt affectionate, like a soft hand tucking them in. And just before SpongeBob's thoughts faded into that same stillness, he whispered to no one, "Good night, Sea Bear." The sea became a vast cradle of sound, the low hum of water moving through coral, the faint ringing of shells, the whisper of sand settling on stone. SpongeBob floated, his thoughts blurring between waking and dreaming. Patrick snored softly beside him, his body rising and falling with the rhythm of the waves. Every sound, every motion around them felt deliberate, as if the ocean itself were breathing in time with them. In the distance, a faint golden shimmer appeared again. It wasn't the sea bear this time, nor the canyon's glow. It was something subtler, the memory of light still clinging to the water. It spread slowly, like ink swirling in reverse, soft and luminous. SpongeBob blinked through it, half dreaming. Shapes began to form silhouettes of creatures he couldn't quite name. Fish with fins like ribbons, whales glowing like lanterns, jellyfish drifting through fields of coral that looked like floating gardens. He realized with a calm certainty that these weren't real creatures, they were memories of the ocean's past. Old lives, old songs, old movements, still living within the sea's body. Every ripple, every bubble, was an echo of something that once was. The glowing shapes moved in spirals just like the sea bear's footprints in the sand. Slow, circular, endless. As SpongeBob watched, one of the glowing shapes, a small sea turtle, drifted closer. It moved so slowly that it seemed to carry centuries in its shell. When it passed by, the water around it shimmered with symbols, the same spirals and waves that had once glowed in the canyon floor. The turtle's eyes met SpongeBob's for a brief, eternal second. He didn't hear words, but he felt them, like a vibration inside his chest. Remember gently. Then the turtle drifted past and disappeared into the haze. SpongeBob whispered to himself, "Remember gently." He didn't fully understand, but he knew it mattered. The glow around them began to shift again. Where the canyon walls had been, the light now painted an open horizon, a vast underwater plain, golden and endless. It didn't look like the seafloor anymore. It looked like the sky flipped upside down. Patrick stirred slightly, muttering in his sleep. "Is it morning already?" SpongeBob smiled faintly. "Not yet, buddy. Just a little more dreaming." The water above shimmered as if dawn were arriving beneath the waves. Long beams of gold and blue stretched across the sand, lighting up trails of old footprints, enormous paw prints that curved and crossed through the valley, fading into the distance. SpongeBob followed them with his eyes. Each step glowed for a moment, then dimmed, then another appeared ahead, a chain of motion, endless and peaceful. He realized it wasn't just one sea bear. The prints were of many sizes, some large and heavy, others tiny, almost delicate. Whole families, maybe walking together through time, across the ocean floor. The sight filled him with a warmth that was almost too big to hold. It wasn't fear or awe, it was comfort. A knowing that nothing here was ever truly gone, that the sea remembered everything and everyone gently. A soft breeze, or what felt like one, brushed through the water. It carried whispers, faint and layered, like hundreds of distant voices singing in unison. The words were impossible to make out, but the feeling was unmistakable. Gratitude. SpongeBob closed his eyes and listened. The sound wrapped around him, rising and falling like breathing. The melody had no beginning or end. It was simply there, like the ocean's heartbeat. Patrick's voice, half asleep, floated through the water. "SpongeBob, do you think the sea bear's happy now?" SpongeBob looked at him, his best friend, floating weightlessly among 1,000 memories, and smiled softly. "I think it always was, Patrick. We just never listened close enough." Patrick snored again in response, which somehow made the moment even softer. The paw prints ahead began to blur. The further they went, the less they looked like footprints, and the more they looked like waves repeating, blending, becoming part of the water itself, as if the sea bears had walked so long that they became the sea. A pulse of light moved through the sand, spreading outward from the prints. It reached SpongeBob and Patrick, flowing around their bodies like silk. It didn't feel like light or water, it felt like memory. For a brief, weightless second, SpongeBob saw flashes. The sea bear swimming through glowing coral fields. The sea bear sleeping under a silver reef while the tide sang above it. The sea bear nuzzling a smaller one, its paw pressing gently into sand. And then the images faded, leaving behind only the soft hum again, the deep, endless vibration of the sea dreaming. SpongeBob felt tears form, though they turned into tiny bubbles and floated upward. "Thank you," he whispered, unsure who he was speaking to. The ocean, the legend, the memory, maybe all of them. The hum answered with a single, warm tone like a heart slowing to rest. The canyon began to dissolve into darkness again, but not in a way that felt sad. It was the kind of darkness that came with peace the moment before sleep, when everything goes quiet and safe. The glowing prints faded one by one until there was only one left, the smallest, right beneath SpongeBob's hand. He placed his palm gently over it. The sand was warm. Patrick drifted closer in his sleep, bumping lightly against SpongeBob's side. SpongeBob smiled and whispered, "Good night, sea bear." The last footprint pulsed once under his hand, a soft golden beat, then faded into the sea. The water around them dimmed into deep indigo, the color of calm and night. Only the faint shimmer of plankton remained, swirling slowly upward like stars rising through the water. The hum faded into silence. The ocean was still. The story had been told. The camera, or point of view, pulled back slowly up past the coral ruins, up past the canyon, up toward the quiet shimmer of the surface. Through the water's veil, faint moonlight rippled gentle and distant. From high above, SpongeBob and Patrick were just two tiny glowing shapes in an endless blue world, asleep beside each other. The waves curved over them like soft clouds. The light danced on their forms like a lullaby. The sea was still singing. The scene lingered for a long time. No movement, no sound, only the slow, timeless pulse of the water. A single bubble escaped from the canyon, drifting upward and catching a glint of silver from the moonlight. Not the kind of silence that feels empty. This was a silence alive with rhythm, like the ocean had slowed its heartbeat, just to listen to itself. Tiny streams of light drifted down from above, threading through the water like strands of silk. They touched the sand below, glowing faintly as they fell, and disappeared into the rippling current. SpongeBob floated slowly through it all, weightless and calm. Every motion he made sent little rings of gold drifting away from him, fading into the deeper blue. His eyes blinked open, heavy, peaceful, and for a moment he didn't remember how he'd arrived here. Everything around him looked softer, quieter, as if he had stepped into the memory of the ocean rather than the ocean itself. Patrick drifted nearby, his body slowly turning with the current, one arm outstretched, his hand gently brushing the sand. A soft snore bubbled out of him, tiny air pockets rising lazily toward the surface. SpongeBob smiled faintly. The calm of the sea was starting to seep into him, each breath slower, each blink longer. He glanced below where something vast and glowing rested beneath them. At first, it looked like a mountain of coral. Ridges of gold, crimson, and pale blue weaved together, pulsing faintly like veins under skin. But as SpongeBob floated closer, the shape began to make sense. It wasn't just coral. It was the form of something ancient, slumbering. A giant mound in the shape of a bear, its face gentle, almost smiling, its paws curled beneath it like it had simply lain down to rest. Every curve was covered in coral, but between the branches, SpongeBob could see faint glows of moving light, slow, steady, rhythmic. It was breathing. SpongeBob didn't move for a long moment. He just watched the faint rise and fall of the coral mound, the way the sand lifted slightly and settled again, as if the sea itself were inhaling and exhaling. Each motion sent a warm current through the water, brushing against SpongeBob's skin like a sigh. Patrick stirred, mumbling in his sleep. 5 more minutes. His voice drifted away with the bubbles. SpongeBob turned his gaze back to the mound. Something about it felt sacred, not in a way that demanded respect, but in a way that simply asked for quiet. He could feel the same hum from before, the one he and Patrick had heard near the canyon. But here, it was slower, deeper. It didn't sound like a growl or a warning. It sounded like a lullaby sung in reverse. The water shimmered as another current passed through. Long strands of kelp waved gently, their tips glowing faintly in the dim light. Small fish, almost transparent, swam in lazy circles above the mound, their movements synchronized as though they were keeping watch. SpongeBob floated closer, hands folded in front of him. The closer he got, the stronger the hum became, not louder, just deeper. He could feel it through his body now, through the very water around him. It wasn't sound anymore. It was vibration, heartbeat against heartbeat. When he reached the edge of the coral, the glow shifted. The coral beneath him responded, brightening slightly where his shadow touched it, as if acknowledging his presence. SpongeBob whispered, "Hello?" His voice barely formed bubbles. But the coral glowed in reply, a soft, pulsing wave of light that rippled outward. Patrick twitched awake and blinked. "SpongeBob, where'd the ground go?" "Shh," SpongeBob said softly. "I think it's sleeping." Patrick squinted, confused. "Who's sleeping?" SpongeBob pointed. "The sea bear." Patrick's eyes widened for a moment, then softened. He looked down, then around, then at SpongeBob again. "Looks comfy," he said and yawned. "Wish I had a coral blanket like that." SpongeBob giggled quietly. "Me too." They both floated there for a while, side by side, barely moving. The mound's gentle breathing filled the water around them, with a pulse so soft it could have been mistaken for the rhythm of their own hearts. Above them, rays of light stretched through the surface, liquid gold falling through endless blue. They bent and shimmered as the waves moved, making the coral below glow brighter in patterns, like ripples of fur across the sea bear's back. The scene felt endless. Time no longer mattered. Minutes, hours, they dissolved into the rhythm of the ocean. SpongeBob closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, the glow continued, a faint orange warmth, like sunlight seen through sleep. He could feel a story forming around him, not words, but sensations. A story told through warmth, sound, and light. He could almost hear the sea bear's dream. It wasn't a voice, exactly. More like echoes of the past, rising and falling like waves. A mother's soft growl, a cub's slow, clumsy steps, rain falling into tide pools. The world breathing itself into being again and again. Patrick mumbled, half asleep. "Do you think it dreams of salmon?" SpongeBob smiled, eyes still closed. "Maybe, or maybe it dreams of quiet." Patrick nodded drowsily. "Quiet's nice." Their words dissolved into bubbles. The coral glowed again, brighter this time, the light pulsing slowly outward. Each pulse sent a wave of warmth through the water, wrapping around the two friends. It wasn't heat. It was something deeper. The kind of warmth that lives between heartbeats. Tiny plankton drifted through the light, each one catching the glow like a spark. Soon the whole area was filled with floating specks of gold and blue, turning gently as they rose and fell. It looked like stars underwater. Patrick reached out lazily, trying to catch one. His hand moved through the glow, leaving soft trails that lingered for a moment before fading. He smiled in his sleep. "It's soft?" SpongeBob's gaze drifted to the sea bear's coral face. He noticed the way the coral branches curved around what looked like closed eyes. He could almost see movement behind them, slow and steady, like the flicker of a dream behind eyelids. Something about the sight made him feel incredibly small, but not scared. More like he was a child standing beside something ancient and kind. He whispered, "Rest well." And for a moment, just for an instant, the glowing eyes beneath the coral flickered. A single brief shimmer of light passed through them, and then they settled again. SpongeBob felt a ripple of calm spread through him so strong that it almost brought tears. He floated back a little, resting against a nearby rock. The hum of the sea filled his mind until it replaced every thought. It wasn't music anymore, it was thought. It was memory. It was the sound of the sea bear dreaming. The ocean held stillness, like a song that forgot its end. Each second stretched long and heavy, but not in a burdensome way, in the way deep sleep stretches, endless and soft. SpongeBob and Patrick floated quietly above the coral mound, the sea bear's resting form pulsing faintly below them. The hum continued slow, resonant, like the heartbeat of the sea itself. Every time it throbbed, the water shimmered with a barely visible wave, as if time itself were rippling outward. Above, the moonlight still reached through the surface. It wavered gently, forming trails of liquid gold that swam downward, dividing into threads that danced along the coral's edges. It felt like the moon was whispering to the sea, and the sea was whispering back. Patrick's breathing matched the rhythm perfectly. Each inhale followed a soft surge of the current. Each exhale released a little trail of bubbles that twirled upward, glinting in the light. SpongeBob drifted closer to him, his eyes half closed. The kind of half-sleep where the line between waking and dreaming fades into nothing. Somewhere far below, a whale called. The sound arrived like thunder wrapped in velvet, deep, slow, echoing across the sea floor. It wasn't loud, but it filled everything. Even the coral seemed to hum in response, trembling faintly as if the note belonged to it. SpongeBob smiled, whispering, "It's like the ocean is talking to itself." Patrick mumbled through a yawn. Or maybe it's the bear snoring. His words melted into the water and dissolved into laughter that sounded more like bubbles. SpongeBob looked down again. The coral mound seemed even larger now. The longer he watched it, the more it seemed alive, not just in breath, but in presence. The coral wasn't just sitting on the sea bear, it was part of it, growing with its rhythm, shaped by its dreams. The sand around the mound shimmered faintly with rings of light. They expanded and faded, each one following the sea bear's invisible breath. In the very center of it all, small spirals of glowing dust floated upward, forming delicate patterns that looked almost deliberate, like writing. SpongeBob tilted his head. The symbols weren't like the ones he'd seen on the coral stones earlier. These looked older, softer, less like a language and more like feelings turned into light. Curves that looked like comfort, circles that looked like memory, lines that pulsed like quiet laughter. A current passed by, stirring SpongeBob's body slightly. He turned in the water, letting himself move with it. The flow felt warm, as though the sea bear's breath had become the current itself. It brushed his arms, his sides, his cheeks, every touch slow and kind. Patrick floated upside down now, his belly rising above his head. He snored softly, a tiny bubble escaping each time, and one of the transparent fish swam up to inspect it before darting away. SpongeBob giggled quietly again. Even the fish are curious about you. Patrick mumbled something incoherent in reply, still half asleep. The hum deepened again. This time, SpongeBob felt it through the sand, through the coral, through himself. The rhythm grew slower, deeper, like the sea bear's breathing had settled into a dream within a dream. And with each pulse, SpongeBob saw more. Not with his eyes, with something else. Flashes of glowing forests of coral filled with moving shadows. Silhouettes of giant sea creatures gliding past reefs that no longer existed. A light breaking through from above, scattering through the waves like starlight falling into glass. It wasn't frightening. It was beautiful haunting in a soft, nostalgic way. He realized that what he was seeing wasn't happening now. It was memory. The sea bear's dreams were memories of the ocean itself, every tide, every storm, every still moment remembered. He whispered, "You've been here a long time, haven't you?" The coral shimmered slightly in response, one slow pulse glowing through the bear's form. Patrick's voice floated through the quiet again. "SpongeBob, are we inside its dream?" His words were slow, blurry, sleepy. SpongeBob looked around. "Maybe we are." He could feel it now, how everything around them moved in one rhythm. The water, the coral, even Patrick's breath. Everything had fallen into the same gentle pattern. The whale call returned, softer this time, fading in the distance like the sea's lullaby. SpongeBob closed his eyes again. The hum vibrated against him, through him. His mind began to drift images forming on their own. The sea bear walking along a beach of glowing sand. The moon hanging low, its reflection breaking across waves that whispered secrets. Each footstep left behind ripples that grew coral and flowers instead of fading. It was not a bear of strength or fury. It was a guardian, a sleeper that carried calm wherever it went. SpongeBob's breath slowed. The images blurred and folded into one another, melting into color. Soft pinks, deep blues, molten golds. He wasn't sure if he was dreaming now. The sea bear's presence was so strong, so steady, that it didn't matter anymore whether he was awake or not. He had entered the rhythm completely. The coral beneath them began to hum more gently, the vibration spreading outward like ripples through the ocean. Small fish gathered above it, their fins glowing as they swam in lazy, endless loops. Each one followed the same circular path, tracing the pattern of the sea bear's resting heart. Patrick floated down slowly until he was lying on the sand beside the coral mound. His arm fell across a patch of glowing seaweed, which dimmed for a moment before brightening again, as if adjusting its light to his touch. He mumbled sleepily, "It's warm here." SpongeBob joined him, settling down nearby, resting one hand on the coral. It pulsed gently under his fingers, like holding the sea's breath. He exhaled a soft bubble and watched it rise. The bubble caught a golden beam and shimmered like a tiny star. "Do you think it's dreaming happy dreams?" SpongeBob asked quietly. Patrick didn't answer. He was already asleep again. SpongeBob smiled, the corners of his eyes softening. "I hope so." He looked at the coral's glowing ridges again. Each groove seemed to tell a piece of a story. He couldn't read a story that didn't need words. He thought of all the things the sea bear had seen. The first coral sprouting, the oldest wave folding, the moon's reflection through countless nights. The thought filled him with quiet awe. To exist that long, to rest that peacefully, was something beyond understanding. The hum shifted once more, lowering until it almost disappeared. SpongeBob pressed his hand gently against the coral as if to say, "Thank you." He felt a faint warmth return, one slow, calm pulse that traveled through his arm and into his chest. His eyelids fluttered. The world around him blurred. The coral's glow dimmed slightly, not out of exhaustion, but like a lamp turned low to preserve calm. The golden rays from above melted into cooler blues. The entire ocean seemed to sigh one long, endless breath that carried every sound, every movement, into perfect quiet. The ocean darkened gently, not with fear, but with depth. Colors that once glowed brightly began to dim, their light settling into soft gradients of blue and violet. Every shimmer turned faint, like stars behind thin clouds. SpongeBob felt it. The slow descent into stillness, as if gravity itself had changed direction, pulling not downward, but inward, toward the center of calm. He floated close to the coral mound again. The ridges no longer looked like stone or reef. They looked like the folds of something sleeping, breathing beneath layers of time. His reflection flickered faintly across its surface, shifting each time the sea bear's breath passed through the water. The hum returned quieter, deeper. It didn't come from outside anymore. It came from within him. He could feel it vibrating through his arms, his chest, his eyelids. Every heartbeat began to sync with that sound. Every thought slowed to match it. And then something opened. It wasn't a sound or a movement. It was a feeling, like the ocean itself had turned its face toward him. The coral beneath his hand warmed slightly, and the world dissolved. He wasn't underwater anymore. Maybe he still was, but in another layer of it. The water glowed faintly from below, and currents of golden light swirled like ribbons. The sand stretched into endless plains, rippling like soft fur under invisible wind. Above him, the moon hung close, impossibly close, its reflection wrapping around him in silver folds. In the distance, he saw a figure walking slowly across the seabed, immense, graceful, heavy with age. The sea bear. Its body shimmered, made not of flesh, but of glowing coral and sand bound by light. Each step it took left ripples in the sea, and those ripples bloomed into tiny constellations, bubbles that drifted upward and burst like stars being born. There was no sound of walking, No growl or roar, only the faint hum that never left. SpongeBob drifted closer, his tiny form dwarfed by the glowing creature. He wasn't afraid. Something about it felt right, like seeing the ocean in its true form for the first time. He whispered, though the words barely formed, "You're real." The sea bear turned its head slowly. Its eyes glowed like twin moons, vast and calm. They held the kind of silence that wasn't empty, the kind that contained every sound ever made. When it blinked, the water shimmered gold again. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The hum grew softer, and in that vibration, SpongeBob could hear something, not words, but meanings. He saw flashes of memory again, but this time they were clearer. A storm raging over the ancient sea. Coral being torn away, then regrown stronger. Creatures seeking shelter beneath massive waves. And always the sea bear watching, walking, keeping balance. The memories flowed like currents through SpongeBob's mind. He saw the creatures sleeping beneath the volcanoes, calming the molten heart of the earth. He saw it swimming through whirlpools, steadying the wild spirals into gentle eddies. Every movement brought stillness. Every breath brought quiet. He realized what it was, not a monster, not a myth. The sea bear was the ocean's dream of peace. Its shape was born not from anger, but from the need to rest, to let the sea itself sleep without storms. SpongeBob watched, mesmerized. The bear's glowing body passed through the coral fields, its light leaving behind new life. Tiny anemones opened where its shadow fell, and schools of glowing fish followed like drifting lanterns. Where it walked, the sea changed. Where it paused, silence deepened. Every motion felt eternal. He reached out a hand toward it. To his surprise, his fingers didn't meet resistance. They passed gently through its glowing fur, scattering trails of golden dust that drifted upward like glowing pollen. Each grain shimmered briefly before dissolving. For a moment, SpongeBob felt everything, the weight of the ocean, the pulse of its heart, the still rhythm that lay beneath every wave. It was too vast to hold, yet too gentle to resist. He closed his eyes. He could feel the sea bear breathing through him. Then, in the faint echo of that breath, came another image. He saw a shoreline, one that didn't belong to Bikini Bottom. It was older, untouched. The sand there was black and glistening, and above it stood ancient coral pillars shaped like claws. Between them, a cave glowed with faint blue light. Inside that cave, the sea bear had once slept, not in coral, but in silence itself. That place wasn't just a home. It was a cradle, the ocean's heartbeat resting between tides. SpongeBob drifted toward it in the vision. The closer he came, the slower everything moved. Time stretched again, each second turning into an eternity of color and light. The hum grew almost imperceptible, fading to a pure tone that seemed to exist inside his heartbeat. He felt peace. He didn't need to breathe, didn't need to think. He existed the way coral did, quietly, beautifully, endlessly. The sea bear looked back once more. Its eyes met his, glowing with patient kindness. Then it began to dissolve, not vanishing, but returning. Its shape turned to drifting sand, its light breaking into thousands of golden threads that wove themselves into the coral mounds, the reefs, the waves. The bear was not gone. It was everywhere. The vision trembled. The golden light dimmed to silver, then to pale blue. SpongeBob blinked. He was lying once again on the sea floor beside Patrick. The coral mound still glowed faintly beside him, shaped like a sleeping bear, only now it looked more peaceful than before, its edges softened, as if wrapped in dreams. Patrick stirred, mumbling in his sleep. "SpongeBob." The bear said goodnight. SpongeBob smiled faintly. "Yeah, buddy," he whispered. It did. He looked upward. Through the layers of water, he could still see the faint shimmer of moonlight. The currents were slower now, moving like the ocean was resting after a long day. Fish drifted lazily around them, their fins tracing slow arcs through the silence. Every sound, the faint hum of coral, the distant whale call, the soft movement of water wove together into one eternal melody. The sea bear was still here in every ripple, every glow, every silent beat of the deep. SpongeBob felt it in his chest, calm and steady, like a promise that would never fade. He closed his eyes again. The last thing he heard before sleep took him was that same hum, not loud, not grand, but perfect in its stillness. The kind of sound that says, the ocean is dreaming again. The ocean no longer trembled. It breathed. Each current that once stirred the sand now flowed in patient rhythm, in and out, like the slow rise of sleeping lungs. The sea bear's hum had faded, but its echo lingered everywhere, turning the silence into something alive. SpongeBob drifted, neither fully asleep nor awake. Time here didn't move. It stretched softly, bending around the warmth that filled the water. Patrick was nearby, curled up against a soft bed of seagrass, his chest rising and falling like a drifting bubble. Every few seconds, a small snore escaped him, blending perfectly with the sound of the sea. Above them, the coral mound shimmered faintly, not bright, not loud, just steady. It no longer looked like a shape of a bear, but like the ocean's memory of one. Every ridge glowed with lines of gold, flowing gently into the water around it, feeding light into the sea like roots feeding the earth. The whole place felt sacred, but not in a distant way. It felt homelike, the kind of quiet that invited you to rest, not worship. A soft current passed over SpongeBob's hand, and for a moment he imagined the sea bear's paw brushing against it, enormous, warm, forgiving. He smiled, eyes still closed. It didn't matter if it was real. The ocean was kind enough to let him believe. Tiny bubbles rose from the coral's edges, spiraling upward like silver dust. They shimmered in moonlight, turning into little mirrors of the sleeping sea below. Each one carried a flicker of gold from the mound drifting upward, bursting gently, scattering brightness into the endless dark. SpongeBob followed one with his eyes, watching it rise until it disappeared into the blue distance. He thought, that's how the sea bear dreams, piece by piece, breath by breath. He turned toward Patrick. His friend's starfish arms twitched slightly in the sleep, reaching out like he was hugging the water itself. A faint grin spread across his face. SpongeBob laughed quietly, the sound more like a sigh. Even down here, under all this silence, Patrick could still find a way to dream loudly. A school of glowing jellyfish floated by, their tentacles pulsing softly like beating hearts. They drifted around the coral mound, circling it as if drawn by invisible music. Each pulse of light synced perfectly with the hum beneath the sand, creating a rhythm that felt endless. It wasn't a melody anyone could hum. It was deeper than that, like the sound of the world remembering itself. SpongeBob sat up slowly. He didn't feel heavy or tired anymore. He felt balanced, like every part of him was finally breathing with the sea. When he placed a hand over his chest, he could still feel the slow vibration, the same one that had carried him. through the sea bear's dream. It wasn't fading. It had become his. A gentle shadow passed above. He looked up and saw the faint outline of a giant whale gliding across the moonlight, graceful, slow, ancient. Its tail stirred the water in wide arcs, sending threads of silver rippling across the seabed. For a moment, it felt as if the whale bowed its great head toward the coral mound before continuing its journey. Respect from one ancient creature to another. The light above shifted again. The moon's reflection rippled softly, stretching and breaking as clouds drifted over the surface. The rhythm of the waves above changed slower, calmer, like the sea was tucking itself in for the night. Every color deepened. Blue into violet, gold into amber, silver into soft white. The whole ocean seemed to sigh. SpongeBob leaned back, letting himself sink slightly. The sand beneath him was warm now, humming faintly. Patrick murmured something about sea marshmallows, still dreaming. A small laugh bubbled up, and then he closed his eyes again. His breathing matched the ocean's perfectly. The vision of the sea bear began to return not as a creature, but as fragments of light woven into the currents. He could see its outline in the drifting sand, in the shape of coral branches, in the soft curvature of the waves above. Everywhere he looked, traces of it existed, gentle, unspoken, eternal. The sea bear was not gone. It had become the stillness itself. The longer he watched, the clearer it became. The sea bear wasn't meant to be feared. It wasn't a guardian or a warning. It was a promise that even the wildest oceans could find their rest, that even the loudest storms could dream of silence. A warm current passed through him, curling around Patrick and the coral mound, circling like an embrace. The hum grew fainter but never disappeared. It felt like the last note of a lullaby that doesn't end it, just becomes part of the air. A small school of glowing fish darted past, weaving between coral arches. They left behind trails of golden dust, forming a spiral that slowly unraveled into the current. It looked almost like handwriting a language of light, spelling something ancient across the sea. SpongeBob couldn't read it, but he somehow knew what it meant. The sea remembers. And it did. Every breath, every shimmer, every silence here carried memory. It didn't fade. It rested. He lay back again, looking up toward the faint glow of the surface. The moonlight filtered through the waves, scattering into liquid threads. Each one flickered as it reached the coral mound, as if bowing to the dream below. He watched until the lines blurred, until they melted into the calm. The sea bear's hum pulsed one final time, low, slow, complete. Then came a stillness so deep, it felt like the ocean had closed its eyes. Bubbles rose, then slowed. Coral petals swayed, then stopped. Even the jellyfish halted their rhythm, suspended in perfect quiet. The world paused to listen, and then breathed again. Patrick turned in his sleep, mumbling, "Good night, Bear." The sound of his voice rippled gently through the silence, carried by the current, until it vanished into the blue. SpongeBob smiled and whispered, "Good night, sea." Above, the first hints of morning touched the surface faint, pale rays filtering through endless water. They reached the coral mound and scattered into golden mist. The sea bear's glow faded with the light, merging with the warmth of dawn. There was no goodbye, only continuation. SpongeBob drifted upward slowly, carried by the gentle tide. Patrick followed, still asleep, arms floating like seaweed. The coral mound remained below, resting, dreaming, waiting for the next quiet century to pass. As they ascended, SpongeBob looked down one last time. The mound pulsed faintly, once a heartbeat. Then it was still. By the time they reached the softer, lighter layers of the sea, the hum had faded completely. Only silence remained, the kind of silence that feels like music played too softly to hear. He turned on his back, eyes closed, letting the sunlight wash over him. The warmth blended perfectly with the chill of the deep. He felt small, safe, infinite. Patrick snored beside him, a bubble forming and popping with every breath. SpongeBob laughed one last time, then sighed, letting sleep finally take him fully. The ocean rocked them gently, like hands cradling a child. Below them, the sea bear dreamed again, quiet, eternal, kind. And above, Bikini Bottom shimmered faintly beneath the morning sea, unaware of the story still sleeping beneath its waves. SpongeBob floated in the middle of it, surrounded by nothing but soft light and the feeling of gentle warmth pressing against his skin. He didn't know if he was awake anymore. He didn't care to. Somewhere in the distance, a golden ripple shimmered, a single ring of light spreading outward through the darkness, like the surface of the moon trembling in slow motion. It touched the edges of the sea around him, and suddenly the black water began to glow. Soft blues melted into purples, purples into gold. Every color moved like breath, expanding and fading in rhythm, as though the ocean itself was asleep and dreaming beside him. He turned slowly in the water, his movements weightless as if gravity had stopped caring. All around him were floating fragments, shards of coral glowing faintly like starlight trapped in glass. They drifted upward, forming patterns in the water, gentle constellations that seemed almost alive. One piece brushed past his hand and vanished into sparkles, leaving warmth behind. Patrick floated nearby, upside down and snoring quietly. Each snore formed a tiny bubble that drifted lazily to the surface before bursting into faint golden dust. The sight made SpongeBob smile. Even here, even in this dreamlike deep, Patrick was the same peaceful, unaware, perfect. Then the hum began again. It didn't come from above or below. It came from everywhere, surrounding them like the ocean's own heartbeat. It was lower than thunder, slower than time, steady and infinite. Each pulse vibrated through the water, shaking nothing and everything at once. With every hum, the coral fragments shimmered brighter, as though responding to some ancient call. SpongeBob looked toward the source, though there wasn't one. The sea seemed endless, but then, through the haze of glowing mist, something began to form. At first, it was only a shape, barely visible, massive, slow, graceful. Then light caught its edges. Gold turned to silver, silver to white, and white to something beyond color. And from the silence emerged the sea bear. But it wasn't like before. This one was not made of coral or sand. It wasn't a creature of the ocean floor. It was light, pure, soft, endlessly flowing light, shaped into the form of a bear. Its fur looked like moving stars. Its body shimmered with rivers of faint gold, like molten glass under the moon. Each breath it took rippled through the water, bending the world around it, softening everything. SpongeBob froze. He wanted to speak, but no sound could exist here. Words felt too heavy for a place made entirely of dreams. He simply watched. The sea bear walked through the glowing mist slowly, every step leaving behind bursts of luminescence that floated upward like glowing petals. When it turned its great head, its eyes opened not bright, but warm, like deep amber light at sunset. Those eyes met his, and the hum deepened. It wasn't frightening. It felt familiar, like hearing your own heartbeat echoed back to you through the sea. The bear's gaze held him still, and in that silence, SpongeBob understood what this place was: not the ocean, not the world beneath it, but the dream the ocean. He was inside the sea bear's rest. The bear moved closer, the glow from its body painting gentle ripples across SpongeBob's face. Each ripple carried warmth that settled deep into his chest, dissolving every bit of fear, every trace of thought. The closer it came, the lighter he felt, until it seemed he wasn't even made of water or sponge anymore, just air and calm. Patrick floated a few feet away, snoring louder now, tiny bubbles escaping from his mouth. One drifted up and brushed against the sea bear's fur, bursting into a flicker of light. The bear paused and looked down at him. Instead of growling, it simply lowered its great head, eyes soft with patience. A low, gentle sound vibrated through the water, a kind of underwater purr. Patrick smiled in his sleep, still hugging his shell. SpongeBob couldn't help but laugh quietly. The sound came out as a stream of bubbles that sparkled in the golden light. When the sea bear's eyes turned to him again, the laughter faded, not from fear, but reverence. He felt small, but not insignificant, like a grain of sand that understood its place in the shore. He extended his hand slowly through the water. The sea bear leaned closer. Its nose brushed his palm. Warmth flooded through his arm, spreading outward, soft and slow, until his whole body tingled with light. He could see its faint glows spreading through him, outlining his shape in soft luminescence. For a moment it looked as if he was part of the same light that made up the bear, and in that touch, he heard it not in his ears, but in his heart. The voice wasn't made of words. It was rhythm, vibration, emotion. But its meaning was clear. You are not outside the dream. You are the dream. The message echoed through him like the tide itself. It wasn't something he could respond to, only feel. The sea bear pulled back slightly, its massive shape flickering between stars and coral, between reality and myth. Then it began to walk again, or drift, as if weightless through the vast expanse of glowing water. SpongeBob followed. The world around them began to change, the mist thinning, revealing distant shapes beneath them. Reefs made of pure light, glowing plants that swayed like music, creatures formed entirely of shimmer and shadow. They moved slowly, bowing as the sea bear passed, as if honoring something ancient and sacred. Everywhere it went, the water shimmered with color. Every ripple carried music, soft choral tones, echoes of waves and wind and distant wails. It wasn't a song. It was a memory too big to be heard all at once. SpongeBob felt tears rising, though they weren't really tears, just small bubbles escaping his eyes. They floated upward, reflecting starlight as they rose. He didn't know why he was crying. Maybe because it was beautiful. Maybe because he didn't want it to end. The sea bear paused ahead. It looked back at him, its expression calm, ancient, kind. The water around it pulsed once a deep breath of the ocean, and everything stilled again. SpongeBob floated motionless, his hand still glowing faintly. The sea bear moved slowly, every step an echo that rippled through the dreamscape. It didn't disturb the water, it shaped it, weaving light through the darkness like a painter brushing color across endless canvas. SpongeBob followed behind, his own glow faint but steady, pulsing in rhythm with the bear's quiet hum. Around them, the sea transformed. The glowing mist began to thin, replaced by soft rolling clouds of blue and violet light. They drifted like underwater auroras, curling and folding over one another, shifting with every breath the bear took. Each movement of the creature's body seemed to guide the ocean's color, as if it were the guardian of balance, not through power, but through stillness. SpongeBob looked down. Beneath his feet, the ocean floor was made of light. Golden sand patterns spiraled outward in perfect circles, forming shapes of seashells, coral, and strange ancient runes that glowed faintly whenever his fins brushed over them. It felt like walking across the heartbeat of the world. Patrick floated nearby, spinning gently in place, completely asleep. Every now and then he'd mumble something, "Jellyfish pancakes," or "No, Mr. Krabs, not the sea pickle tax again." His words drifted away like bubbles and popped into tiny sparks of light that fluttered upward, joining the dream sky above. Even his nonsense sounded sacred here. As SpongeBob moved closer to the sea bear, he noticed something shimmering in its fur. Within the glowing strands of starlight, tiny visions flickered scenes of the past, of oceans long gone, of creatures that lived and vanished before time even began. There were whales the size of mountains, coral towers that reached the sky, and small golden fish that looked like living fireflies. All of them swam through the bear's light, fading and reappearing like memories that refused to die. The sea bear stopped. It turned its head slightly as though it had noticed SpongeBob's awe. A deep vibration rolled through the water, soft and slow. It wasn't sound, it was meaning. The words formed inside his chest like ripples made of thought. Dreams remember what the sea forgets. The message lingered, glowing faintly in his heart. SpongeBob blinked, trying to understand. The bear looked forward again, continuing its path. He followed, his mind filled with the phrase. Maybe that's what this place was, not just a dream, but the ocean's own memory. Every wave, every tide, every creature, all of it stored somewhere deep beneath time. The sea bear wasn't just sleeping, it was guarding, protecting the forgotten dreams of the sea itself. They reached a vast clearing where the water shimmered brighter, expanding into what looked like an underwater sky. Stars drifted below instead of above, and the currents flowed like clouds. In the center, a single orb of glowing gold floated, pulsing slowly like the heart of the entire dream. SpongeBob could feel it from where he was. Each pulse vibrated through his chest, soft and warm, calling to him. The sea bear approached the orb and sat its enormous body folding gracefully, paws resting on either side of the glowing sphere. Its eyes closed and the hum deepened. The light around them flickered, dimming slightly as if the world was holding its breath. SpongeBob hesitated. He wanted to move closer, but something inside told him to stay still. There was reverence here, a kind of silence that demanded to be respected. He floated quietly, watching as the bear breathed in rhythm with the light. Each inhale pulled color from the surroundings, blues, purples, pinks, all swirling toward the orb. Each exhale released golden mist that spread through the water, renewing everything it touched. It was creation and rest happening at once, a cycle without end. SpongeBob closed his eyes and tried to match the rhythm. He inhaled with the bear, feeling the stillness gather. He exhaled, feeling the light pass through him. The world soften. He could feel the boundary between himself and the sea dissolving. It was peaceful, infinite, perfect. Then the hum shifted. It became deeper, slower, almost a melody. And within that melody, SpongeBob began to see images again. This time, they weren't memories of the sea, they were his own. He saw the crusty crab glowing in twilight, the neon sign flickering softly. He saw himself laughing with Patrick under the moon, jellyfish dancing overhead. He saw Squidward sitting by the window, pretending not to care, but smiling just a little. And somewhere in those memories, he felt the same rhythm that filled this place, the hum of calm, the comfort of belonging. The sea bear opened its eyes again. For a moment, they weren't eyes at all. They were two stars, each holding galaxies inside. When they looked at SpongeBob, he felt time stop. The bear rose slow and steady and began to walk toward him. As it approached, the orb of light followed, floating beside its chest, pulsing softly like a second heart. SpongeBob could feel the hum inside his bones now, each beat syncing with his own heartbeat. When the bear stood before him, it lowered its head once again. Without thinking, SpongeBob raised his hand. The orb drifted closer until it hovered right between them. Its glow painted the water in soft gold. And then it began to split. Half of the light sank into the sea bear's chest. The other half drifted into SpongeBob's. The warmth was overwhelming, not painful, just vast. It was like being filled with a memory too large for one heart to hold. He gasped, but no sound came out, only a stream of bubbles that glowed before fading into the dream sky. When the light settled, he looked down at himself. His body glowed brighter now, not blindingly, but gently, as if every pore held a piece of the sea's calm. The bear stood silently, eyes half closed. He understood then it had shared part of its dream with him. A piece of the ocean's memory now lived inside him, too. The world around them began to shift again, the light dimming, the colors blending into deeper blues. Patrick stirred nearby, yawning underwater. 5 more minutes, Mom, he mumbled, rolling over. The sea bear watched him fondly, a faint shimmer of amusement, glowing in its starlit fur. SpongeBob smiled, feeling the warmth of the gift still glowing in his chest. The bear tilted its head toward him, and once more that deep vibration filled the sea. Guard the quiet. The words came not as command, but as trust, a whisper that sank deep into his heart. Guard the quiet. He nodded slowly, understanding without fully knowing why. The bear turned again, walking toward the horizon of light that shimmered at the edge of the dream. Its enormous form began to fade, first its paws, then its body, until only its eyes and soft glow remained. Finally, even that vanished, leaving behind golden ripples that drifted gently outward. SpongeBob floated alone for a moment, surrounded by the fading glow. He didn't feel sad. He felt full, like he had been part of something eternal. The hum still echoed faintly in the water, quieter now, softer, but it was there, inside him. Patrick finally woke up, blinking. Hey, buddy, are we still dreaming? SpongeBob looked around, smiling faintly. I think the dream's dreaming us now. Patrick nodded sleepily. Cool. And just like that, he drifted back to sleep, bubbles rising lazily from his mouth. SpongeBob looked up toward the faint light above the surface, still far, still glowing. He could feel it calling him, not urgently, but kindly. The dream wasn't ending. It was letting him go. He took one last look around the empty space where the sea bear had stood, the fading glow, the stillness that felt alive. And then he closed his eye. The hum pulsed one last time through his chest, soft and deep, and everything dissolved into gold. The golden mist that once surrounded SpongeBob began to fade, dissolving into the soft blue of returning waters. The world that had felt infinite, vast, and sacred now seemed to breathe inward, folding itself neatly back into silence. It was not an end, just a slow return. SpongeBob floated weightless, suspended in that in-between state, half dream, half waking. Around him, the dream currents shimmered with fading light, swirling gently like whispers of forgotten lullabies. Every pulse of the ocean seemed slower now, deeper. He could still hear the hum of the sea bear, faint and steady, echoing through the water like the low vibration of a distant whale song. It didn't fade away completely. It became something softer, something within him. When he opened his eyes, he saw Patrick still asleep, turning slowly in the gentle current. Tiny bubbles floated from his mouth in a steady rhythm, pop, 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 each one catching a glimmer of the golden light before vanishing. SpongeBob smiled faintly, letting his hand drift through the bubbles. Above them, the ocean's ceiling shimmered with moonlight, but it wasn't the cold light of the surface anymore. It was warm, honey-colored, the kind that seemed to exist only in dreams. He realized the world above and below had begun to blur together. There was no difference between sky and sea, only endless stillness. Then faintly he heard a sound like wind brushing through coral. It was soft, uncertain, but familiar. Voices. They were whispers, not words, just tones rising and falling like waves. He turned toward the sound and saw shadows moving through the glow. Not dark, but translucent outlines of creatures made from starlight and sand. They drifted gracefully, circling him in silence. For a moment, he thought he might be seeing jellyfish again, but no, their shapes were too defined. These were figures. They looked like fish, sea turtles, manta rays, yet they glowed with the same golden light that had filled the sea bear's heart. He realized suddenly these were its dreams, fragments of the sea bear's memory, alive and swimming freely through the sea. They moved in slow spirals around SpongeBob and Patrick, tracing patterns through the water. Wherever they passed, the ocean brightened, the coral stirred, and the sand rippled in delicate circles. It was like the sea bear's breath still lingered in every corner of the deep. SpongeBob reached out his hand, letting one of the light creatures brush past his palm. It felt like warmth and wind, no substance, just presence, a whisper of something eternal. He closed his eyes again and let himself float upward. Each inch he rose, the water grew clearer, the gold fading into silver blue. The ocean was waking up, and he was being carried with it. He could sense Patrick drifting beside him now, the two of them ascending slowly toward the soft, moonlit surface. The glow below them, where the sea bear had been, was now dim, distant, but steady. Like the glow of a hearth you leave behind, knowing it will still be burning when you return. As they rose, SpongeBob's thoughts began to quiet. He didn't try to make sense of what he'd seen. Some things weren't meant to be understood, they were meant to be felt. And right now, all he felt was peace. He remembered the sea bear's final words, "Guard the quiet." It echoed through his mind, gentle as a wave curling against sand. He thought about how much noise the world above could hold the bustle of the Krusty Krab. The clattering of dishes, the laughter, the chaos, even Squidward's clarinet echoing off the walls. He smiled. Maybe guarding the quiet didn't mean running from the noise. Maybe it meant carrying stillness inside him, no matter how loud everything else became. The water thinned, the light sharpened. The surface shimmered just above, painted with moonlight. SpongeBob extended his hand and broke through. The first breath of open air filled his lungs, cool, fresh, heavy with the scent of salt. He floated on his back, staring up at the vast night sky. The stars above looked identical to the glowing creatures below, tiny fires drifting in an endless sea. For the first time, he couldn't tell where the ocean ended and the sky began. Patrick bobbed beside him, snoring loudly, his belly acting like a flotation device. Every snore made tiny ripples spread across the water, breaking the reflection of the moon. SpongeBob laughed quietly to himself, the sound barely more than a whisper. The waves lapped softly against their sides. He let the rhythm carry him in, out, a perfect mimic of the sea bear's breathing. The sea's heartbeat and his own had become one. As he floated, his thoughts began to blur again. Images from the dream flickered behind his eyelids, the glowing orb, the sea bear's eyes, the choral that breathed, the words that hummed instead of spoke. He knew he might forget the details when he woke fully, but that didn't matter. The feeling, that deep, glowing calm, would remain. It would live quietly inside him, waiting to rise again whenever he needed it. The current shifted slightly, nudging him toward the shore. Far away, the faint lights of Bikini Bottom twinkled through the water, soft, sleepy, alive. He imagined his pineapple house, the cozy bed waiting inside, Gary curled up on his pillow. He suddenly felt a wave of warmth, not from the sea, but from something like gratitude. He whispered softly into the night, "Thank you." The words disappeared into the breeze, carried back across the waves, sinking down toward the deep back, toward the place where the sea bear dreamed. For a moment, the ocean shimmered. A faint golden pulse spread across the surface, almost invisible, but there, as if something deep below had heard him and smiled. Patrick stirred, blinking one eye open. "Did you say something?" he mumbled. SpongeBob turned his head and grinned. "Just saying good night." Patrick yawned, rolling over. "Oh, okay. Night-night, Mr. Ocean." He was asleep again before the next wave arrived. SpongeBob chuckled softly, then closed his eyes. The moonlight pooled across the waves, gentle and slow. Everything seemed to move in rhythm, the sky, the sea, his breathing. He felt himself drifting, not into sleep this time, but into stillness. That same stillness the sea bear guarded beneath the waves. A quiet so deep that even dreams seemed to rest within it. Time passed, or maybe it didn't. The world became one long, peaceful sigh. Somewhere far below, the sea bear lay in the heart of the ocean, curled within coral and memory. Its body glowed faintly, rising and falling with the tides of its eternal dream. Around it, the ocean continued to hum soft, ancient, alive. And above it, SpongeBob floated like a small, bright echo of that same peace, carrying the dream upward into the waking world. The stars began to fade as dawn approached, painting faint streaks of rose and violet across the horizon. The night was ending, but the calm remained a bridge between dream and day. SpongeBob opened his eyes one last time before sleep claimed him completely. The sea was quiet. The sky was endless. And somewhere deep beneath, a guardian dreamed not of power or fear, but of stillness. SpongeBob floated on the surface, half dreaming, half awake. The waves lifted and lowered him in soft rhythm, like a cradle. The sky above was changing, the stars melting away one by one, replaced by the first breath of dawn. Patrick snored beside him, drifting lazily in slow circles. Every few moments, a gentle current would turn him over, his pink belly glistening faintly in the early light. The bubbles from his snores rose and popped, catching sunlight that had only just touched the water. SpongeBob's mind felt light, almost empty, not in a hollow way, but like a shell washed clean by waves. The dream of the sea bear lingered, soft around the edges, already dissolving into memory. But its hum still moved through him as steady as the sea itself. He turned onto his stomach and looked downward, peering into the deep. The ocean below glowed faintly, no longer golden, no longer filled with dreamlight, but alive all the same. He could still see the faint shape of the coral mound, the resting place of the guardian. A soft pulse rippled upward from that spot, a glow like a heartbeat seen through layers of glass and water. SpongeBob smiled. The sea bear slept again. He whispered quietly into the morning air, "Rest well, big guy." The ocean answered not with words, but with warmth, a slow, invisible movement that brushed across his face and rippled the surface. It felt like a sigh, peaceful and deep. The current shifted, guiding him and Patrick gently toward the shallow sands. The closer they came to shore, the more the water sparkled sunlight filtering down through tiny waves, breaking into threads of brightness that danced across the seafloor. A few fish swam past, their scales glinting in soft pink hues of dawn. Jellyfish glowed faintly, their tendrils curling like ribbons in slow motion. Even the coral looked as though it had awakened from its own dream, opening and closing with the rhythm of the tide. Everything was alive again, but calm. The kind of calm that doesn't need silence to exist. It hums quietly beneath the sounds of life. As the first beams of sunlight spread through the waves, SpongeBob turned his gaze toward Bikini Bottom in the distance. He could see faint outlines, the Krusty Krab sign, his pineapple house, even Squidward's Easter Island head, all bathed in the soft blush of morning. The world looked smaller from out here, quieter. He wondered if the others were still asleep. Maybe they could feel it too, that stillness lingering in the water, wrapping the town like a gentle blanket. The current nudged him again, and he felt sand beneath his hands. He had drifted right up to the shallows. He stood, feet sinking into the cool seabed, and stretched. Patrick bumped softly into his side, blinking awake. "Morning already?" Patrick murmured, rubbing one eye. "Yeah," SpongeBob said with a small smile. "But it feels like it never really ended." Patrick yawned, stretching his arms like a starfish does, wide and slow. "I had the weirdest dream," he said. "There was this huge bear made of sparkly stuff, and it was humming a song. It was really nice." SpongeBob chuckled softly. "That wasn't weird," he said. "That was real, or maybe it was both." Patrick thought about it for a long moment, then nodded. "I like both," he said finally, flopping onto the sand again. "Real dreams are the best kind." The waves rolled gently up the shore, foaming around his feet. SpongeBob sat beside him, the two of them silent for a while, watching as the sunlight stretched farther and farther across the sea. A soft breeze moved through the water, carrying the faint scent of salt and coral blossoms. Somewhere in the distance, a pod of whales sang long, low notes that blended perfectly with the ocean's hum. It almost sounded like the sea bear's song continuing in another form, spreading through the sea like a memory retold by the waves. SpongeBob closed his eyes, listening. Each sound, the bubbles, the breeze, the faint shifting of sand seemed to fall perfectly into place. The world had rhythm again. Balance. He remembered the sea bear's final hum, the way it had pulsed through everything, water, light, even the silence. And he realized something simple, something he hadn't noticed before. The sea bear didn't just sleep under the ocean. It was the ocean. Its heartbeat was the current. Its breath was the tide. Its dreams were the shimmer of morning light across the waves. And now that it slept, peacefully, the sea itself had fallen into the same dream, one endless, glowing calm. Patrick rolled over, already half asleep again, mumbling something about pancakes. SpongeBob smiled and leaned back, resting his hands behind his head. The water lapped gently against his sides. He thought about the stories the sea bear might have dreamed, ancient ones, full of the beginnings of the world when coral was still forming and the stars still learned how to shine. Maybe, he thought, the sea bear had been dreaming all along, and the whole ocean was just one part of its story. And maybe they, SpongeBob, Patrick, everyone in Bikini Bottom, were small pieces of that same dream. Little bubbles floating through a sleeping sea. He laughed quietly to himself at the thought. It didn't make sense, but it felt right. Far below, the coral mound shimmered once more, a soft pulse, barely visible now. The water carried the light upward in thin ribbons, winding around SpongeBob and Patrick like the last lines of a lullaby. Then the glow faded, leaving only sunlight, bright, gentle, real. The sky turned a deeper gold. The day had fully arrived, but the ocean remained calm, as though it still remembered the night's song. SpongeBob stood and looked out at the horizon. "Sleep well, Guardian," he said softly. "We'll keep things peaceful up here." The breeze answered him with a cool touch against his cheek. He turned back toward the town, Patrick following behind him, both of them wading through the shallows. As they walked, schools of tiny fish darted around their feet, glimmering like living stars. The light refracted through the water, painting gentle patterns across their faces. It felt like walking through a dream that didn't want to end. By the time they reached the edge of Bikini Bottom, the warmth of the day had fully arrived. The streets were still quiet. Gary was perched by SpongeBob's door, waiting patiently. "Meow?" SpongeBob knelt, petting him gently. "Hey, buddy," he whispered. "It was a good night." Gary blinked slowly, then turned and crawled toward the door. SpongeBob followed, glancing back one last time at the ocean. The waves shimmered, bright and endless. For a brief second, he thought he saw a golden flicker beneath the surface, the faint shape of something vast and kind. But when he blinked, it was gone. Maybe it had never left. He smiled, stepped inside, and let the door close softly behind him. Outside, the sea continued to hum a tune too old to name, too calm to fade. The sea bear slept in the deep, its heart beating slow and steady beneath the sand, keeping the ocean's rhythm alive. And far above, in a quiet pineapple house, SpongeBob drifted into sleep again, the echo of that same rhythm guiding his breath. The world had found its stillness once more. It was a sound that didn't travel through the ears, but through the bones, deep, low, and resonant, as if the sea itself was remembering how to sing. SpongeBob floated motionless in the soft current, eyes half open. Around him, the water glowed faintly with threads of gold and indigo. It wasn't sunlight, not really, it was the light of life itself, carried through the sea's endless bloodstream. The sea bear's dream was spreading. The coral ridges pulsed in time with the music, opening and closing like giant petals. Fish moved in perfect rhythm, as if the melody had entered their hearts. Even the sand seemed to breathe. Patrick stirred nearby, his arms floating gently beside him. Nice song," he murmured sleepily, bubbles rising from his mouth like silver beads. SpongeBob smiled faintly. His voice was soft, a whisper that blended into the current. "It's the ocean," he said. "It's singing again." The melody wasn't constant. It came in long, sweeping waves, first a deep hum that made the water vibrate, then a higher tone, fragile and distant, like a bell heard through miles of blue. Between these sounds, silence flowed, not as absence, but as rest, the pauses between breaths of a sleeping world. As the song deepened, SpongeBob felt something stir within him. Not fear, not wonder, but belonging. He felt as if he were part of something impossibly old. A story the ocean had been singing since before time began. He closed his eyes and drifted downward, letting the current carry him. Below, the light thickened, turning from blue to violet. The world became soft around the edges, like a dream dissolving. Schools of glowing fish passed by in slow formation, their bodies leaving trails of silver dust that spiraled upward like incense smoke. The deeper he sank, the louder the lullaby became, though loud wasn't quite right. It was everywhere now, like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. Every coral, every pebble, every grain of sand seemed to hum with the same note. And then, through the shifting colors, he saw it, the chamber of echoes. It wasn't built. It had simply grown. A vast hollow beneath the seafloor, surrounded by ancient coral arches and pillars of translucent stone. Streams of light passed through them, refracting into rainbows that curved and folded like liquid glass. SpongeBob drifted inside, barely moving. His shadow fell across the chamber floor, which shimmered like a pool of mercury. At the center stood something that pulsed faintly, a massive pearl, larger than SpongeBob himself. Its surface rippled with light, each wave matching the rhythm of the lullaby. Patrick floated in after him, eyes wide but unfocused. "Whoa. Big marble," he mumbled, spinning slowly in place. SpongeBob reached out, not to touch it, but to feel its warmth through the water. It wasn't just glowing, it was alive. The sound, the song, the hum, all of it seemed to come from within the pearl. And when he leaned close, he saw reflections swirling inside. The sea bear, the reefs, the ocean currents, even Bikini Bottom, all moving together in one slow, eternal dance. The lullaby swelled, not louder but fuller, as if the sea had inhaled. The chamber walls shimmered with patterns of coral light. Jellyfish drifted through the arches, their tendrils glowing like fireflies. SpongeBob's eyes softened. His breathing matched the rhythm. In that moment, he felt weightless, not just in body, but in memory. Every sound of the world, laughter, tides, bubbles, even silence seemed to fold into the melody. Patrick whispered without opening his eyes, "It's like the sea's putting itself to sleep." And SpongeBob nodded slowly. "Maybe it's putting everything to sleep." The lullaby filled every space, flowing through coral veins and hollow shells, through the smallest grains of sand. Even the distant volcano, once fierce, now quiet, began to glow faintly as if hearing the song in its sleep. SpongeBob floated near the center of the chamber, his arms drifting gently beside him. His reflection in the great pearl was soft and flickering, as though he too were becoming part of the sea's dream. He could feel something under the melody, a heartbeat, slow, steady, deeper than anything he had ever known. It pulsed through the water like time itself. For a while, he didn't move. He just listened. The song was changing. New notes began to rise, long, trembling tones that felt like voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They weren't words, just pure sound, echoing in slow waves through the current. It was the sea remembering all who had lived within it. Whales, coral, jellyfish, even plankton. Each had their own thread in the harmony. The sea bear's tone was the lowest, vast and ancient. SpongeBob's own heartbeat synced with it unconsciously. Patrick, half asleep, began to hum softly along, matching the rhythm without realizing it. His voice mixed with the music, a small, clumsy sound, but it fit perfectly. And then something unexpected happened as SpongeBob began to see the music. The sound waves shimmered in the water like light made of glass. They formed spirals and ribbons that drifted around him, touching the coral pillars, lighting them from within. The chamber became an underwater cathedral made of glowing breath. He lifted a hand slowly, and one of the ribbons coiled around his fingers. It vibrated gently, sending a warmth through him that made his eyes water, not from sadness, but from a deep, indescribable peace. For the first time, SpongeBob understood that the sea wasn't just water and life, it was memory. Every wave carried songs from the past, laughter, storms, dreams, all layered together like the shells of coral. He whispered softly, "We're inside its memory." Patrick turned, blinking slowly. "Whose?" "The ocean's," SpongeBob said. "And the sea bears, too. Maybe they're the same thing." Outside the chamber, the currents began to swirl gently. The lullaby reached further now, moving past the reefs, past the sleeping fish, into the open blue. Schools of manta rays drifted in formation, their wings glowing faintly with the rhythm. The whole sea had become an orchestra. SpongeBob and Patrick rose slowly, carried by the current. Above them, the water shimmered with liquid gold. Shapes appeared in the distance, outlines of whales, dolphins, and spirits of coral, all moving in slow harmony. It felt less like watching and more like remembering. Every creature was part of the same pulse, each movement tied to the same song. The pearl's glow dimmed slightly, as if it had given all its light to the world outside. SpongeBob turned back to look at it. The surface of the pearl now showed ripples of moonlight and coral forests swaying to the music. The sea bear's silhouette appeared faintly within it, enormous and gentle, eyes closed in endless rest. For a long moment, SpongeBob just stared. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The sea bear's presence was enough a warmth that felt like being held. He reached out again, his hand trembling slightly in the current. The glow from the pearl touched his fingers, wrapping them in light. Patrick yawned behind him, a long, bubbly sound. "Hey, SpongeBob." "Yeah?" "I think I can hear the stars," Patrick mumbled, eyes drooping again. SpongeBob smiled softly. "Maybe you can." Because above them, far beyond the waves, the stars themselves seemed to shimmer in rhythm. Every twinkle was like a note, every faint glow another part of the song. The lullaby wasn't just beneath the waves anymore, it was everywhere. And as SpongeBob watched, tiny glowing motes began to fall from the surface, drifting down like snow. Each one carried a faint sound, a single tone. When they touched the sea floor, they melted into the sand, adding their voices to the deep harmony. He realized then that the sea wasn't just singing to itself, it was singing to the sky. The ocean and the stars were answering one another, a call that had no beginning and no end. Patrick had drifted off completely now, spinning slowly in the soft current, bubbles floating from his mouth in steady rhythm. SpongeBob floated close beside him, eyes half closed. His body began to glow faintly too, reflecting the light around him. The music filled him until it felt like he might dissolve into it entirely. For a moment he imagined what it would be like to be a note in that song, to never wake, never speak, just exist forever as sound and light in the ocean's heart. The thought didn't scare him, it felt like peace. The lullaby deepened again, a low tone that rolled through the chamber, like thunder softened by miles of water. It wasn't loud, it was vast. It seemed to reach every corner of the world. The coral walls shimmered brighter for a moment, then slowly dimmed, as if sighing. The jellyfish folded their tendrils and drifted downward like falling petals. Everything was slowing. Even time. SpongeBob could no longer tell if minutes or hours had passed. The song had erased the edges of the world. Only warmth remained and the feeling of being safe inside something eternal. He thought of the sea bear, resting beneath layers of coral, its breath gentle as tides. He thought of the stories whispered by the sea and the way they had always ended, not with endings, but with quiet. And he realized the truth of the lullaby. It wasn't a song about sleep. It was sleep. The ocean was singing itself into rest, one note at a time. He let himself drift, eyes closing fully now. His last thought was of how beautiful it sounded, the sound of everything finding its way back to stillness. The current carried him upward, slow and steady, like a dream rising through the water. The lullaby followed him, softer now but unbroken. When he reached the surface, moonlight kissed his face. The stars rippled above like reflections in a pond. And somewhere far below, the sea bear smiled within its dream, humming softly to keep the sea asleep. The ocean had turned to velvet. Every ripple had slowed into long, soft undulations that barely disturbed the light. The song was still there, but it had changed again, thinner, higher, like threads of silver weaving gently through the water. SpongeBob floated near the surface, eyes closed, his arms moving slowly with the current. He wasn't sure if he was awake or dreaming. Every time he tried to focus, the world shimmered and folded into something new. Above, the moon poured light into the sea like milk spilling into glass. Each ray broke apart into glowing particles that drifted downward, illuminating the sand. Patrick floated a few feet away, curled like a starfish, his slow snores blending perfectly into the ocean's melody. A school of glowing fish passed by, their scales glittering like tiny bells. They swam in a spiral, circling SpongeBob once before continuing into the deep blue distance. Every movement they made seemed to create a note, like plucking strings on a harp made of light. SpongeBob smiled softly, still half in dream. He whispered, "Even the fish are singing." The water answered with a low vibration, a soft that made the coral hum faintly. The lullaby had become something alive, not just a sound, but a being that moved through everything. Far beneath them, the sea bear's mound pulsed once with faint light, like a heartbeat that stretched through the entire ocean floor. The coral surrounding it glowed in response, passing the light from one branch to another in ripples. And then silence. Not absence, but silence full of presence. The kind of quiet that comes only when everything has said what it needed to say. The lullaby didn't stop. It just went inward. The sea inhaled slowly, holding the breath in eternal calm. A bubble rose between SpongeBob and Patrick, slow and perfect, reflecting the moon. They both watched it without speaking. It drifted upward until it touched the surface and disappeared soundlessly, leaving only a faint shimmer of silver. That moment felt endless. It was as if the entire ocean had leaned in to watch a single bubble rise and vanish, proof that even the smallest thing could be beautiful in its ending. Patrick's voice broke the silence, lazy and half asleep. "Do you think the sea bear dreams of us?" SpongeBob blinked slowly, his gaze distant. Maybe we're part of its dream." Patrick frowned in the softest way possible. "That means if it wakes up, we—" SpongeBob smiled faintly, finishing for him. "We fade?" Patrick blinked, thought for a moment, and then shrugged. "Okay. Sounds sleepy." SpongeBob laughed quietly. The sound was like a ripple in the still water, small, warm, gone as soon as it came. The water around them began to glow brighter. Thin ribbons of blue light drifted upward from the sea bear's resting mound, twisting through the water like strands of music itself. They surrounded SpongeBob and Patrick, wrapping them in a slow, gentle spiral. Every ribbon that touched their skin seemed to hum a note, soft, welcoming, peaceful. SpongeBob's eyelids fluttered heavy now, and he whispered, "It's singing to us again." The ribbons continued to rise, carrying warmth through the sea. The coral opened its petals, revealing soft lights inside. Starfish lifted their arms and began to pulse with tiny golden glows. Jellyfish unfolded like flowers. Every living thing in the ocean had become an instrument in the same symphony, a lullaby written not in sound, but in existence. And still the sea bear slept. Its great outline beneath the coral seemed to expand and contract like waves breathing in slow motion. SpongeBob could see its shape faintly through the glowing currents, vast, calm, infinite. For a moment, he thought it might open its eyes, but it didn't. It didn't need to. Its dream had reached its purest form, one where everything that ever lived in the ocean was at peace. The light from the volcano far below faded to a gentle pulse. The last remnants of magma had cooled long ago, replaced now by golden coral and soft sand. The volcano, once feared, now served as the heart of the ocean's sleep. SpongeBob turned slowly, his body weightless, hair drifting like seaweed. "Patrick," he said softly. Patrick made a small sound halfway between a snore and a sigh. SpongeBob continued anyway, voice quiet and round like a whisper carried by current. "You know, I think the sea is alive because it dreams." Patrick cracked one eye open. "What's that mean?" "It means everything here, the sounds, the lights, even us. We're all part of that dream." Patrick thought for a long time. Then he smiled sleepily. "And I hope it never wakes up." SpongeBob nodded, watching as another wave of blue light passed over them. "Yeah," he whispered. "Me too." The lullaby shifted again just a little. It grew even slower, even softer, until it was barely more than a breath. The coral lights dimmed. The jellyfish lowered themselves closer to the seafloor. The fish formed long, slow-moving lines, settling into rest. SpongeBob felt his body start to sink, his back brushing against the sand. He didn't fight it. The current cradled him, pulling him downward in small circles. The last thing he saw before closing his eyes was the faint outline of the moon shimmering through the water above, glowing perfectly round, reflected in thousands of tiny air bubbles. As he drifted into sleep, he could still feel the ocean humming. It was softer now, like a mother's voice, far away. The song no longer came from outside. It was inside him, part of his own heartbeat. He smiled faintly, bubbles leaving his lips as he whispered, "Good night, Sea Bear." Patrick murmured something in reply, too quiet to understand, and rolled slightly to one side, still holding his little shell. The scene slowed until it felt like time had stopped entirely. Only the shimmer of plankton drifted through the dark water, rising like faint stars through the sea's ceiling. In that endless calm, even the ocean seemed to sleep. It wasn't death, it wasn't ending, just pure stillness. The kind of peace that could last forever. The deep ocean had fallen into its longest breath. Nothing stirred but the slow rise of tiny bubbles, weaving upward like threads of thought. The light had dimmed into a silver haze, the kind that blurs dreams into memory. Somewhere far above, the moon had begun to sink. Its reflection trembled across the surface, then rippled, stretched, and finally merged with the waves. The ocean's lullaby continued, softer now, as though sung from a great distance. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was the pulse of the sea itself, an invisible rhythm holding everything in suspension. SpongeBob drifted in this rhythm like a leaf in a breeze. His eyes were closed, his breathing perfectly matched to the water's motion. Every inhale drew the ocean's hum deeper into him. Every exhale sent it back out, spreading gentle ripples through the current. His mind felt as weightless as the jellyfish gliding past. Thoughts dissolved before they could fully form. He no longer remembered how long he'd been there or even where there was. It didn't matter. The sea had no edges, and neither did he. Patrick, nearby, had turned slightly in his sleep. The small shell he held glowed faintly now, filled with a soft blue light. Every few seconds it released a tiny hum, blending perfectly with the lullaby's tone as if it had become a part of the song itself. A pair of manta rays passed overhead, their wide fins spreading shadows across the sand. For a brief moment, their silhouettes looked like the sea bear's great paws, stretching across the ocean floor. Then they drifted onward, swallowed by the dim glow. Far below, the mound where the sea bear slept pulsed one last time with light. The glow expanded outward in slow waves, reaching every coral and every grain of sand. The water shimmered gold, then blue, then faded again, the way embers glow before they cool. SpongeBob stirred slightly, sensing it even in his dreamlike state. He whispered, barely audible, "Good night, old one." The words didn't echo. They simply vanished, absorbed by the water. The sea bear's spirit, deep within the coral, seemed to answer with silence, a silence full of meaning. The ocean had learned the art of quiet. All across Bikini Bottom, the calm spread. The kelp forests swayed slower. The reefs stopped crackling. Even the bubbles from vents came out in long, unbroken lines. Everything moved as one great body, breathing, resting, dreaming. A pale current drifted over SpongeBob and Patrick, warm like sunlight but too soft to belong to day. It carried faint traces of glowing dust, each speck shaped like a star. As it touched their skin, it melted into them, becoming part of their glow. They didn't notice. They were too far gone into the sea's dream. In that dream, they walked on sand that sparkled like glass. The water around them was shallow and endless, stretching to every horizon. Above them hung a sky filled with jellyfish instead of stars, pulsing in slow rhythm. The sea bear appeared again, not as a creature of size or fear, but as a shape made of calm light. Its body was translucent, filled with drifting galaxies of coral. It looked down at them gently. The corners of its mouth curved in something close to a smile. Neither SpongeBob nor Patrick spoke. They didn't need to. The bear lowered its head until its snout brushed the water, sending ripples outward, each ripple a memory. They saw flashes. The night they first heard the legend. The carvings on the coral stone, the deep breath beneath the waves, the glowing chamber, the first hum of the lullaby. And then it all faded back into silence. The bear's eyes closed again. Its body began to dissolve into particles of light, breaking apart like dust caught in a current. Each fragment floated upward, passing SpongeBob and Patrick, then spreading across the ocean sky. The light reached the surface and merged with the reflection of the moon, turning the entire sea into a mirror of stars. SpongeBob opened his eyes one last time. The vision was still there, stars below, stars above, everything shining in perfect balance. He felt weightless, like the world itself had exhaled. Patrick's voice came softly, barely a whisper. "SpongeBob." "Yeah, Patrick? Do you hear that?" SpongeBob listened. The lullaby had changed again, or maybe it hadn't. was so faint now that it was hard to tell whether it came from outside or inside. It was the sound of water resting. "Yeah," SpongeBob murmured. "It's the sea bear's last song." Patrick smiled without opening his eyes. "It's nice." SpongeBob nodded, though Patrick couldn't see it. "It is." Above them, the first hint of dawn began to touch the water. The color shifted from deep blue to pale lavender. The stars began to fade, one by one, melting into the lightening sky. But the peace didn't fade. It stayed, thick and eternal, woven into the sea itself. The currents slowed even further. The fish had stopped moving altogether, hovering in perfect stillness. The coral had folded its petals, glowing gently from within. The world had fallen into a kind of sleep so deep it might never need to wake. And still, SpongeBob floated there, eyes half open, smile resting softly on his face. He felt no desire to move. His thoughts came like whispers in fog. Maybe this is what the sea feels like when it dreams. Maybe this is forever. The last of the moonlight faded from the surface. In its place, the soft warmth of the rising sun began to touch the edges of the ocean floor, turning the sand into molten gold. SpongeBob opened his eyes a little wider, the golden glow reflected in them. He looked at Patrick, still asleep, still holding his tiny shell like a treasure. He whispered, "Good morning, buddy," though it was still barely dawn. Patrick didn't answer. But a bubble floated from his mouth, glimmering with the last traces of moonlight. SpongeBob chuckled quietly. The sound was enough to stir the coral around them. A few anemones opened, waving their fronds like lazy greetings. The lullaby continued faintly, barely more than memory, now a hum that only the sea could hear. It was no longer a song of endings, but of continuation. The sea bear's spirit rested deep below, its form completely merged with coral and sand. The mound that once pulsed with its heartbeat now glowed only faintly, like a candle nearly out, but still warm. The last verse of the lullaby flowed through the ocean, wordless and eternal. "Sleep, little tide. Rest, little wave. All who wander will drift back home." SpongeBob closed his eyes again. The current rocked him gently, like a cradle. He exhaled once, a stream of bubbles rising toward the brightening surface. As they reached the top, they broke into 1,000 tiny reflections of light. Not a wave moved, not a bubble rose. The vast, endless sea lay in a silence so pure that even time seemed to stop listening. The deep shimmered faintly under the newborn light. Not bright, not dark, just perfectly balanced between both. Far beneath, SpongeBob floated motionless, eyes closed, smile soft. Patrick rested beside him, arms loose, the small shell still nestled against his chest. The glow around them had dimmed into a pale golden haze that pulsed every few seconds, slow rhythm of something larger than life. They were not asleep, not awake somewhere in between. The sea bear's song had ended, but its echo still lingered in the fabric of the sea, stretching outward endlessly. Tiny flecks of light drifted through the water, swirling around them like stars in a night that had no horizon. Every particle shimmered, as though carrying a fragment of the lullaby's melody, repeating it without sound. In the stillness, the ocean began to dream. It dreamed not in images or sounds, but in sensations, the cool touch of deep water, the golden warmth that filtered from the surface, the weightless drifting of all living things. The sea's consciousness spread like mist, moving through coral tunnels, gliding past sleeping whales, brushing against the shells of ancient turtles. Every creature was still, yet connected threads of calm energy linking them together like invisible roots of an infinite tree. The coral mound where the sea bear once breathed began to glow again. Not bright, not fierce, but steady, gentle, like a heart that had found peace after centuries of watching the tides come and go. The mound pulsed once. The light expanded slowly, traveling outward across the seabed. It passed beneath SpongeBob and Patrick, around rocks and coral towers, through the sunken arches and whale bones, until the entire ocean floor shimmered faintly in response. It was the sea bear's last heartbeat, not of flesh, but of spirit. His energy spread not as a roar, but as a whisper that filled every molecule of water. SpongeBob stirred slightly, his eyes fluttering open. For a moment, he didn't recognize where he was. The water around him looked unreal, like a dream made of light. Every grain of sand glowed softly. Every bubble reflected galaxies. Patrick mumbled in his sleep, his words muffled and slow. "Is it morning already?" SpongeBob looked at him and smiled faintly. "I think it's something else, Patrick. Not morning, not night, just everything." Patrick opened one eye, squinting at the endless light. "Everything?" "Yeah." SpongeBob's voice was almost a whisper, like the sea is breathing through us. Patrick nodded slowly, half asleep again. "That's nice." He drifted back into stillness, and SpongeBob turned upward, watching how the surface above glowed neither blue nor gold, but both, merging into something beyond color. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of peace, full of memory. Each gentle current that passed carried fragments of old sounds. Laughter from jellyfish fields, waves crashing on Goo Lagoon, Squidward's clarinet echoing faintly from miles away, Mr. Crab's voice murmuring like a memory. All the noise of life had softened into harmony. The ocean had absorbed it all, smoothed every edge, turned every echo into rhythm, and now that rhythm rested. SpongeBob closed his eyes again and let the current carry him higher, closer to the surface. As he rose, he passed through shimmering layers of water, each one glowing differently. Blue, gold, pink, violet. They shifted like curtains of silk. The deeper he drifted, the lighter he felt. It was as though gravity had surrendered, time had melted, and thought itself had turned into color. He could sense the sea bear's spirit around him, not as a creature now, but as a feeling. The calm had a shape, a presence, vast and tender. It wasn't watching him. It was within him. Every beat of his small heart echoed the same steady rhythm that pulsed through the sea. The bear had become the ocean, and the ocean had become the dream. Patrick floated below, smiling in his sleep, tiny bubbles escaping his nose. His shell still shimmered faintly. The light from it spread in small circles, merging with the glow from the coral mound far away. The two lights met somewhere in the middle, and the sea shimmered brighter, a sign that everything had connected. SpongeBob whispered softly, "Thank you." He didn't know who he was thanking the sea bear, the ocean, or the silence itself, but he meant it. The water around him responded with a gentle pulse, like an unseen heartbeat. He looked down again, seeing the great coral mound at rest. It no longer looked like a bear, nor a reef. It looked like the shape of stillness itself. Waves of light flowed gently across it, forming spirals and circles. For a long moment, SpongeBob simply watched. There was nothing to do, nowhere to go. And in that absence of action, he felt more alive than ever. He realized that peace wasn't quiet because nothing happened. It was quiet because everything belonged. Above, the faint shimmer of morning light began to spread wider, Rays filtered down through the still water like strands of gold thread, wrapping the sleeping ocean warmth. Every coral and shell reflected the light, sending it deeper, scattering it like soft fireflies through the blue haze. The world was waking, but not breaking its calm. It was like the ocean had decided to stay in a permanent dream, half awake, half asleep. Somewhere in the far distance, a whale sang one long, slow note that echoed through the water like a deep sigh. It was the kind of sound that could have been the end of one age and the beginning of another. Patrick stirred again. "Hey, SpongeBob?" "Yeah, buddy." "Do you think the sea bear's gone?" SpongeBob thought for a moment. He looked around at the glowing sand, the breathing coral, the soft current that carried warmth like breath. Then he smiled. "No, Patrick," he said. "I think it's everywhere now." Patrick nodded drowsily. "That's good. Means we're safe, right?" SpongeBob laughed softly. "Yeah, we've always been safe. We just didn't know it." Patrick chuckled once, then drifted back into a peaceful snore. SpongeBob looked upward again. The light was stronger now, but not blinding. It felt gentle, like the kind of morning that never ends. He imagined the sea bear's spirit rising slowly, dispersing through every wave, turning the surface of the ocean into a mirror. And above that mirror, the sky began to bloom streaks of pink and violet spreading like ink in water. The day and night had become one. SpongeBob could feel the world balancing on that moment, not tipping towards sunrise or sunset, just floating between both. It was eternity, captured in stillness. He whispered to himself, "Eternal calm." And as if the sea heard him, the water rippled once a long, gentle wave that passed across the entire horizon. Every layer of water began to hum faintly, not in sound but vibration. The light flickered rhythmically, each pulse slower than the last. Somewhere above, a school of jellyfish drifted by, their bodies glowing faintly pink. They moved in perfect unison, tentacles flowing like silk banners. Each motion seemed choreographed, each pause intentional, as if they too were part of the great sleep. SpongeBob watched them pass overhead. Their soft glow painted trails on the sand below, moving lines of light that bent and curved, forming patterns. He realized after a moment that those patterns looked like writing ancient, circular, like the coral carvings he saw when he first learned about the sea bear's legend. He blinked slowly, and the realization came to him. The sea was still telling stories, even in its silence. The jellyfish floated farther, the symbols fading behind them. But the feeling lingered, a sense that everything, even stillness, had meaning. A current brushed past him, warm, golden, slow. It moved like a sigh from something ancient. SpongeBob let it carry him slightly upward, closer to the surface. As he drifted, he looked down one more time at the mound. It was dimmer now, its glow nearly gone. But that didn't feel sad. It felt complete. Like a lantern that had burned all night and was finally resting. He closed his eyes. Behind his eyelids, that light still danced blue, gold, and soft white. The colors swirled, forming shapes. The sea bear's outline, the reefs, the moon above the crusty crab, Patrick's sleeping smile, the endless waves. They all flowed together, melting into a single image, the sea breathing. SpongeBob felt a single tear drift upward from his eye, carried away by the weightless water. It floated toward the surface and sparkled when it touched the sunlight, splitting into tiny orbs of light. For the first time, he understood that everything, the storms, the quiet, the fear, the peace, had always been one song. And that song was ending now, not in sadness, but in perfection. The ocean hummed softly, as if to confirm. SpongeBob whispered, "Thank you for the story." The water shimmered again, a final ripple passing across the sand, through Patrick's shell, into the sleeping reefs beyond. The response was silent but clear. "You were always part of it." And then, stillness again. Pure, absolute dot. The ocean had become a mirror. Its surface shimmered like glass, perfectly smooth, reflecting the stars so clearly that sky and sea were indistinguishable. It was as if the universe itself had bent downward to rest upon the waves. SpongeBob floated just beneath that cosmic surface, motionless, watching how the light shifted and wove between galaxies of bubbles. Every motion of the sea was infinitely slow, a ballet performed for no one, yet witnessed by all that ever dreamed. Patrick drifted beside him, spinning lazily, mouth open in a sleepy smile. The small shell on his chest glowed faintly, resonating with the rhythm of the distant stars above. The light that pulsed within it seemed alive, a heartbeat that had transcended both sea and sky. For the first time, SpongeBob realized that the calm was not silence. It was harmony. The water hummed with frequencies too deep to hear, yet somehow he could feel them in his bones. The sound of the world breathing. The sea bear's final lullaby had not ended. It had merged with the heartbeat of existence itself. He reached a hand upward, fingers brushing through the slow swirl of starlight filtering through the surface. The texture of the light felt like silk, like the soft edge of memory. When he opened his hand, small ribbons of gold and blue trailed between his fingers, swirling downward like paint in water. And then, for the briefest moment, SpongeBob could see everything. Not just the ocean around him, but its memory. He saw the coral cities rising and falling across centuries. He saw ancient sea creatures drifting through lightless trenches, dreaming in silence. He saw the first ripple of the sea bear's paw print pressed into sand at the dawn of time, when the ocean itself was still young and curious. Every sound he had ever heard, laughter, rain, song, storms, all of it returned in reverse, unraveling into pure tone, then into silence again. Patrick mumbled, still asleep. Warm waves. A bubble escaped his mouth, rising toward the stars. When it reached the surface, it didn't pop, it transformed into a small glimmer of light and joined the constellation above. SpongeBob smiled faintly, whispering, "Even your dreams want to be stars, Patrick." He turned slowly, facing the endless deep. Far below, the coral mound that once held the sea bear's form was now almost invisible, covered in soft layers of sand and moss. The faint shape of the bear was still there, but it had blended into the landscape, like a mountain that had accepted its place among the others. The ocean wasn't mourning its guardian, it was becoming it. As SpongeBob watched, faint lines of light traced across the ocean floor, glowing currents weaving together, forming intricate spirals. The lines connected every coral, every shell, every creature resting in the deep. They pulsed in unison, a vast, glowing network that reached all the way to the horizon. It looked like a heartbeat made of light. He realized then the sea bear wasn't a creature at all. It was the ocean's soul. The calm wasn't a pause, it was completion. The sea wasn't asleep, it was awake in the deepest way possible, a perfect stillness that existed beyond motion. SpongeBob closed his eyes again, breathing with the rhythm of the light. Each pulse sent warmth through his body, a golden hum that resonated deep in his chest. He wasn't just in the ocean anymore. He was part of it. Oh, every molecule of salt water around him felt like skin, every vibration like a heartbeat shared across countless lives. Time dissolved. The concept of minutes, hours, tides, all of it melted away. There was only rhythm, only breath. A gentle current began to swirl around SpongeBob and Patrick, forming a soft spiral. Tiny luminous plankton joined, their bodies flickering like stars. The current lifted them slowly upward, not toward the surface, but toward something greater, something infinite. Above, the mirror of the sea shimmered brighter. The moonlight grew wider, and the stars reflected below began to blend into it, until the entire ocean looked like a galaxy turned upside down. SpongeBob could see both above and below at once, the sky reflected in the sea, and the sea mirrored in the sky. He realized that there was no longer a difference. The ocean and the cosmos had become one endless dream. He whispered softly, "It's all connected, isn't it?" The answer came not as words, but as feeling a warmth that filled every part of him. Yes. Patrick turned slightly, murmuring in his sleep, "SpongeBob, are we home?" SpongeBob smiled gently. "Yeah, buddy. I think we've always been home." The water around them shimmered. The jellyfish returned, drifting in slow motion, their tendrils painting streaks of pink and gold light through the water. They formed circles around the two friends, not trapping them, but guarding them. They pulsed in rhythm, glowing brighter with every beat. It was like a ritual of the sea, a farewell and a blessing combined. From far in the deep, a low vibration echoed. It wasn't frightening, it was a sound of recognition. The same deep tone that had once rumbled when the sea bear slept. Now it was calm, a slow, peaceful rumble that rippled through the water like a giant, gentle sigh. The coral responded by glowing again, a final bloom of light. The whole ocean seemed to exhale, releasing centuries of restlessness. The glow spread outward, reaching every corner of the sea across canyons, through kelp forests, into quiet caves, and across the sleeping towns above. Even Bikini Bottom's faint lights flickered slightly as though acknowledging the rhythm. SpongeBob could almost hear it, the hum of homes, the stillness of his pineapple house. Gary curled up inside, the whole town bathed in underwater moonlight. Everything and everyone was resting. And he knew somehow that this calm wasn't just happening here. It was everywhere. Across every reef, every trench, every wave that touched every shore. The sea bear's dream had become the world's dream. The light began to fade slowly. Not dying, just dimming into perfection. Each flicker of gold became softer, the blue deeper, until everything returned to a pure ocean hue, endless and calm. The jellyfish dispersed, drifting upward, vanishing into the starlit mirror above. The coral settled into shadow. Even the sound of currents thinned until only the faint hum of the universe remained. SpongeBob reached over and took Patrick's hand gently, the two of them floating together in absolute stillness. "Good night, Patrick," he whispered. Patrick's eyes stayed closed, but a small smile crossed his face. "Good night, SpongeBob." A soft current swirled around them once more, like the sea tucking them in. The surface above glowed brighter for one final time, then slowly began to fade, leaving behind faint streaks of silver. The stars above reflected so perfectly that for a moment it seemed like SpongeBob and Patrick were floating in space, surrounded by constellations made of bubbles. Time stretched infinitely. It was no longer possible to tell whether seconds passed or centuries. The sea had become timeless, a single, eternal breath that neither began nor ended. Then from the deepest part of the abyss, a glow began to rise again. Not harsh, not sudden, but slow, steady, golden. The coral mound began to pulse one last time, sending light upward through the water column. It moved toward the surface like sunrise seen from below, layer by layer, transforming the sea from dark to luminous. The light reached SpongeBob and Patrick, enveloping them in gold. They didn't move. They didn't need to. The light passed through them, becoming part of them, turning their outlines translucent, their bodies glowing softly like spirits. For a moment, they looked less like creatures and more like memories, fragments of the ocean's dream-given shape. The current grew still again. The light faded slowly, leaving behind trails that lingered for a few seconds before dissolving. The sea was silent. Completely. But the silence was not emptiness. It was fullness. Peace beyond sound. Oh, SpongeBob's body relaxed completely. His last conscious thought before surrendering to the stillness was simple. If the ocean can dream forever, maybe we can too. He drifted downward slightly, resting beside Patrick once more. Their forms were illuminated by the faint shimmer of plankton and distant moonlight. The ocean cradled them like a mother, each movement of water soft and protective. And as they rested, the light above and below merged, creating a gradient so subtle it felt infinite. The stars seemed closer now. Or maybe, SpongeBob thought before fading fully into sleep, maybe they'd always been inside the ocean all along. Above the surface, the world was still. The moon hung motionless, reflected so clearly that it seemed there were two, one above, one below, both watching over a sea that would never need to wake again. The breeze was soft, barely rippling the mirrored water. The reflection of the stars didn't waver. It was the calmest night the world had ever known. Bikini Bottom looked like a sleeping constellation. Its buildings, coral rooftops, and soft, glowing streets were faintly lit from within by the memory of the sea bear's last lullaby. The light wasn't bright enough to wake anything. It was the kind of glow that existed only to soothe, like the dim warmth that lingers after a candle goes out. In the heart of the deep, SpongeBob and Patrick remained where the calm had found them, resting among coral flowers that swayed as though breathing with them. Around their sleeping bodies, the sand glimmered faintly, tracing halos that shimmered each time the current moved. They were still, yet not lifeless. The sea had absorbed their rhythm, and their dreams had joined the oceans. Tiny ripples carried those dreams outward. Each ripple held a fragment laughter shared on jellyfishing trips, the sound of waves against a crusty crab, the glow of jellyfish fields at sunset. As those memories spread, the ocean itself remembered. It remembered joy, curiosity, adventure. And for the first time in eternity, the deep smiled. Far beneath them, where even light rarely reached, a new glow began to stir. It wasn't fire nor magma, it was life reborn. The coral that had covered the sea bear's mound began to bloom, releasing spores of light that floated upward in spirals. These tiny sparks spread through the water like glowing seeds, clinging gently to shells, rocks, even passing fish. Each one carried warmth, the promise of balance. Wherever they touched, peace followed. Predators rested. Currents slowed. Even storms above the surface began to ease into soft rain. The sea bear's spirit had become the sea's own pulse, and now it dreamed through everything. Above the coral plains, rays of gold and blue intertwined, shaping faint patterns in the current. If one looked long enough, they could almost see the outline of a giant paw print made of light drifting across the sand, fading softly with every beat. The guardians of the deep, those ethereal shapes of coral and light, who once sang to keep the volcano asleep, now drifted higher, their glowing forms turning transparent. They weren't needed anymore. Their song had been absorbed into the ocean's breath. One by one they dissolved, scattering into trails of shimmer that rose like threads toward the stars. And for every one that vanished, a single bubble rose from the seafloor, glowing faintly with the memory of their lullaby. These bubbles floated all the way to the surface, where they lingered for a moment before bursting, sending tiny ripples that looked like constellations spreading outward. If one were to listen closely at that moment, really listen, they might have heard the faint echo of a melody. Not a song or words, but something deeper, a note held forever in the fabric of the water. It was the sound of the sea bear's heartbeat, continuing on through everything that touched the ocean. Patrick stirred slightly, still dreaming. His body drifted higher for a moment before settling back down beside SpongeBob. His shell necklace, the same small one that had glowed before, pulsed one more time. Then slowly it dimmed, resting beside him like a quiet star. SpongeBob's hand moved faintly, brushing the sand. A soft trail of bubbles escaped his fingertips, curling upward in slow spirals. They carried with them the last wisps of his thoughts, gentle fragments that shimmered and disappeared into the blue. In one of those bubbles, a memory flickered. SpongeBob and Patrick laughing in jellyfish fields, the sound echoing like bells across the sea. The memory floated upward, merged with the glow of the water, and was gone. But even gone, it wasn't lost. The sea had it now. And in the grand stillness, something remarkable began to happen. All across the ocean floor, life began to shimmer in rhythm. Kelp leaves bent and swayed with the same pulse as the lullaby. Seashells opened and closed slowly, timing their movements to the faint hum that filled the deep. Even the smallest grains of sand seemed to dance gently in place, forming ripples that matched the heartbeat of the calm. The sea was dreaming itself into harmony. Every color softened into a palette of blues and golds. Every sound melted into the same note, the hum that never began and never ended. Above, the stars reflected perfectly on the sea's surface. But it was no longer reflection. The ocean was the sky now. It held galaxies within its depths, and the stars above mirrored the glowing creatures that drifted far below. No boundary remained between what was water and what was light. The moon, too, seemed to sink lower as if drawn by the stillness. It hovered just above the surface, its reflection perfectly aligned, until it appeared like a pearl suspended between two worlds. For a moment, the sea, the stars, and the moon were one a single, infinite being made of quiet light. And deep within that unity, the sea bear's outline shimmered once more, not as a creature of muscle or shadow, but as a constellation of gentle sparks, glowing across the deep. Its massive head bowed slightly as if in blessing. From the vastness came the faintest whisper, "Thank you for remembering me." Then it faded. But the feeling stayed, the kind of warmth that fills the world without sound, like sunlight caught beneath the waves. SpongeBob and Patrick didn't stir. They didn't need to. They were part of it now, part of the lullaby, part of the stillness, part of the sea's eternal dream. Above, a whale's distant call echoed through the water. It was low, slow, and so deep, it felt like the echo of the world itself speaking softly in its sleep. The note stretched endlessly, vibrating through coral, shells, and bones, until even the silence began to hum with it. That sound became the heartbeat of the ocean, a rhythm that would never stop. Far away in the shallows near jellyfish fields, the soft glow of plankton began to form patterns again. The currents shaped them into spirals, into symbols old and new, both at once. If one looked carefully, they could see the faint image of SpongeBob and Patrick among them, laughing, surrounded by glowing jellyfish like lanterns in the sky. It was the sea remembering its dream, looping it endlessly so it would never fade. Every creature in the deep sleeping, resting, drifting absorbed that dream into its soul. The snails, the starfish, even the tiny plankton all pulsed with it. The calm had reached every living thing. The ocean had achieved something beyond silence. It had achieved peace that sings, and so it remained. Minutes passed, or maybe millennia. The sea didn't notice. It had no reason to. At last, the final ripple reached the edge of the horizon where the ocean met the sky and the world curved softly into infinity. There the glow thinned into mist, and the mist became stars, and the stars became memories. Each one drifted gently upward, then disappeared, their lights scattered through space like tiny pieces of sleep. If anyone above were to look into the ocean that night, they would see nothing but calm, no movement, no sound, no storms, no waves, only stillness. But beneath that calm lay everything that ever was, every tide, every heartbeat, every dream. The sea no longer shimmered with waves. It breathed in stillness one slow, eternal rhythm that no longer needed to rise or fall. Somewhere in that silence, the last echoes of the sea bear's hum still floated, so faint they were almost imagined, like a dream that lingers at the edge of waking. And yet, it was enough. For deep within the calm, memory began to take shape. The ocean did not speak with words, but it remembered through motion, through the soft pulse of its heart, through the glow of plankton that drifted like stars below the surface. Each tiny shimmer held a story of SpongeBob's laughter, of Patrick's wonder, of the sea bear's kindness and endless patience. When the moon passed overhead, its reflection trembled just slightly, a sign that the sea was whispering again. And if anyone had been close enough to listen, they might have heard it, not in sound, but in feeling, a pulse, a warmth, a breath. The ocean was telling the story again. There was once a bear, the waves seemed to sigh, who dreamed so deeply that even the sea fell asleep beside him. The current rippled, curling around coral and shell, carrying the tale to every corner of the deep. Each creature that felt it, a crab beneath the sand, a jellyfish glowing in the dark, slowed its motion, resting as though caught in a familiar cradle. They didn't need to understand the story, they simply felt it. Peace pure and complete. The kind of peace that expects nothing. As the sea continued its quiet retelling, the world above began to mirror it. The stars dimmed until they matched the slow pulse below. Clouds drifted like memory foam across the night sky, and even the moon seemed to move more gently, its light bending as though swayed by the sea's dream. Somewhere far from Bikini Bottom, beyond reefs, beyond kelp forests, a group of small fish swam together, drawn to the faint shimmer spreading through the deep. They circled once, then twice, then stopped. Their eyes reflected the glowing sand far below, forming the faintest image of a bear made of light. They didn't know its name, but somehow they remembered the calm it brought. Far away, in an untouched trench, an old shell cracked open, releasing a small stream of bubbles. Those bubbles rose, catching glimmers of light as they ascended, like wishes rising to the surface. When they broke through, they left rings on the water that spread outward for miles, each ring glowing faintly, then fading. The ocean was breathing again. Not with urgency, not with storm, but with peace. It was as if the world had turned into one vast lullaby. No creatures stirred violently. No sounds pierced the silence. Even the coral swayed as though bowing in gratitude. And at the heart of that stillness, two small shapes rested SpongeBob and Patrick, forever part of the calm they had helped awaken. They were not gone, not truly. Their bodies had become part of the sea's rhythm, their dreams the quiet ripples that moved through the world. Above them, the sea bear's constellation flickered once more. It was faint, softer than moonlight, but unmistakably there. It hovered, a guardian in the dark, its eyes closed as though still dreaming. "Sleep," the sea whispered, "for the waves remember you." Slowly, the constellation began to dissolve, first its paws, then its chest, then its glowing head, until only a single orb of light remained where its heart would have been. That light sank gently, drifting down like a falling star, settling at the base of the coral mound. It pulsed once, twice, then stayed steady. The ocean held its breath, and then the faintest hum. A vibration spread through the deep, so soft that even silence leaned closer to listen. The hum became tone. The tone became rhythm. The rhythm became the song, the lullaby of the deep, replaying itself endlessly, not as music, but as existence. That hum flowed upward through the layers of the sea, reaching even the shores of distant lands. Fishermen, sleeping in their boats, felt it in their dreams, a warmth that wrapped around them like sunlight underwater. Children sleeping by coastal towns dreamed of glowing waves that spoke in gentle voices. And somewhere, in a world that had forgotten SpongeBob's name, someone awoke and smiled without knowing why. The legend had become part of the ocean's heartbeat. Every tide now carried it. Every current hummed with it. And though the sea bear no longer walked the reefs or stirred the sand, its essence filled every droplet that touched the world. That was the sea bear's gift, not presence, but peace. Centuries might pass. The reefs might change, the corals might fade, and the stars might shift above, but whenever the ocean grew quiet enough, its voice would return. The same whisper, the same hum. Rest now. The tide remembers you. And in that whisper, the world would soften. The waves would slow. The sea, the sky, and all that live in between would breathe together once more. That was not an ending. It was a circle eternal and complete. Just as the tide always comes back, so too would the legend return, reshaped by time but never forgotten. The sea would tell it again and again until the stars themselves drifted into sleep. And so, in the final hour of that eternal calm, nothing moved. The camera would slowly pull back, drifting upward, higher and higher, revealing the quiet expanse of the sea glowing faintly like liquid glass. No sound. Only the hum, that endless note that began as the sea bear's breath and now belonged to the universe. The stars blurred into the water's reflection until they became one. The ocean turned to sky. The sky turned to dream. Goodbye.